The world quaked at the mention of the accursed name, the dread lord who struck fear into hearts. He truly embodied the essence of evil reigning over the planet. None could match his strength, none could withstand his might. However, the narrative took a twist when a valiant warrior breached the fortress gates to confront the Dark Lord. Upon entering, his gaze fixed on the ominous throne, he commanded its occupant to vacate the premises. The Dark Lord beheld his guest, revealing he had not been concealing himself. The warrior, removing his helmet, greeted him, laying bare his intentions to end his reign of terror. Identified as Furkan the Strong, destined to vanquish evil forever, the Dark Lord remarked on the warrior's pride. Yet before he could continue, Furkan silenced him. As he began to speak, a surge of energy enveloped him. The energy intensified, filling the room like a tempestuous wind. It flowed into the Dark Lord, who proposed they forego pleasantries and engage in combat. Furkan insisted on expressing his long-held convictions, requesting undivided attention. Disregarding this, the Dark Lord brandished his sword, commanding silence. Curious as to why this warrior believed himself superior to others who had ventured there, King Furkan, feeling the sting of humiliation in the question, opted not to respond. Believing himself the mightiest warrior chosen to eradicate all evil, he sought to decapitate the source of darkness. He commanded the Dark Lord to behold the fabled legacy of the great Sword of Glory, the ultimate bane of evil. To his bewilderment, instead of the revered holy sword, he found himself grasping a crude goblin axe. Puzzled by this unexpected turn, he couldn't fathom why he held a mere mundane weapon. The Dark Lord expressed skepticism that such a plain axe could be the holy sword. Realizing, albeit belatedly, that the true sword resided in a magical pouch within a pocket dimension, housing an array of weapons, energy surged forth from the bag once more, as he exclaimed that now the Dark Lord would witness the genuine holy sword. Yet another mishap occurred, and in his hands appeared an ancient staff of a primordial spirit. Despite his growing embarrassment, the warrior persisted in rummaging through the bag for the correct item. After several moments, he retrieved the legendary demon slayer of the First People. While formidable, it still fell short of what Furkan sought from the magic bag. Undeterred, he made multiple attempts until retrieving something utterly perplexing. He quickly recollected it as a fast-moving semi-auto magic punisher from another realm. Growing weary of the stalemate, the Dark Lord urged the warrior to attack, questioning the absence of the holy sword. But Furkan remained unfazed, consumed by his quest to locate the elusive weapon within the bag. As time wore on, he realized with mounting frustration that the sword he sought was not among the items he had retrieved. Meanwhile, the Dark Lord, sensing an opportunity, charged the atmosphere with energy, dismissing the importance of the sword. Despite the Dark Lord's command to attack, Furkan's mind raced, fixated on the missing weapon. A troubling realization dawned on him, unsettling his already fragile resolve. It appeared that he had indeed misplaced his sacred sword, a dire circumstance given the looming battle. Uncertain of his next move, none of the weapons from the magic bag seemed adequate against such a formidable adversary. 3 decades had passed, and the scene shifted to a desolate dungeon known as the Forgotten Citadel. Here, a showdown between a champion of light and a sinister spirit was imminent. The preliminary skirmishes had already drained the warrior's energy, setting the stage for the impending clash. In a barely audible voice, the dark spirit uttered a single word, hinting at the mundane nature of mortal conflict. He scoffed at the notion of a battle, considering it a mere diversion from the eternal boredom of his existence as guardian of the silent citadel. Just as he contemplated taunting the warrior for his feeble weapon, the adventurer seized the moment to strike. Astonishingly, a single strike rendered the guardian lifeless on the floor in an instant. The adventurer gazed upon the inert form before him, bewildered by the swiftness and ease of the outcome. Despite the necessity of the gesture, he felt compelled to utter the somewhat hollow words. With unwavering gaze meeting the gaze of his fallen foe, he acknowledged the opponent's strength. Transformation seized the entire body of the guard, gradually enveloping it in a luminous blue aura accompanied by laughter. As the laughter subsided, the guardian expressed gratitude to the adventurer for the unexpected compliment, his inner energy surging even stronger. The realization dawned upon the warrior that he could sheathe his sword, for within moments, the guard's form almost entirely transitioned into pulsating blue plasma. Going by the name of Johnson, this warrior was nothing more than an ordinary adventurer. The fabled holy sword, passed down through generations, had long vanished along with its last known wielder. Embarking on a quest with his companions, this adventurer sought to rediscover its whereabouts, engaging in battles against numerous formidable adversaries. Finally stumbling upon a dungeon rumored to house the elusive magical blade, they found it to be far more menacing and perilous than Johnson had anticipated. Midway through a corridor, he was startled by an authoritative voice commanding him to halt. Swiveling around, fear gripped him as he believed he had dispatched all adversaries prior. Johnson was astounded to discover that these two individuals had somehow survived until the very end. Indeed, standing behind him were Mr. Magician and Mr. Archer, whom Johnson had assumed to be deceased. Inquiring about their encounters with danger thus far, the warrior received a somewhat reassuring response from the archer, stating that everything had been relatively smooth until that moment. The magician interjected, revealing their encounter with a hidden boss along the way, but to no avail. The archer even speculated they might have been led astray. Examining the map, the warrior acknowledged the significance of this information, considering the substantial payment their group made to the Thieves' Guild for it. The archer took offense at the implication, foreseeing a diet of stewed grass in his near future, but the warrior defended his stance, expressing his willingness to endure much for the sake of adventure. Drawing a comparison to a small boat navigating rough waters, he emphasized their journey towards their goal, braving hardships and adversity. To him, their quest for the Holy Sword was akin to a pilgrimage, rendering the value of a few coins inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. Coins spent in honor of the great warrior's legacy. Disagreeing, the archer challenged the warrior named Johnson to reveal his pouch. The magician, previously silent, commanded silence from the duo as he sensed a surge in mana. The tremors intensified at his words, inciting genuine panic among the group. Sensing the impending moment, the magician declared it was upon them. Gesturing towards the doors at the corridor's end, he attributed the surge in energy to that point. The archer remarked on the intensity of the mana, causing goosebumps to rise on his skin, while the warrior cautioned of the anticipated difficulty of the impending battle. Suddenly, from behind the corridor's doors, a small stream of dust billowed towards the group. Moments later, through a newly formed hole in the door, the silhouette of some monstrous entity emerged. The warrior rallied his group, preparing for the imminent confrontation, while the archer invoked the Lord's protection. As the doors widened further, the ominous spirit warned them to flee while they still could. With the door fully ajar, the group beheld the enemy's imposing figure, feeling the weight of his formidable power. Defiantly, the warrior silenced the dark spirit, vowing they would never retreat from their foe. In response, the dark spirit insisted they had misunderstood, repeating the command to flee. Suddenly, a powerful blow struck his head. Upon closer inspection, the group realized someone stood behind the dark spirit, swiftly impaling him with a single sword stroke. The magician, like Johnson, was utterly bewildered by the sudden turn of events. Before them stood a seemingly human figure wielding a sword with a crimson blade. The warrior leveled his weapon at the stranger, demanding an immediate introduction. For a moment, the man remained silent, then in a hushed tone, revealed that the holy sword was not present. Raising his voice, he demanded the group retrieve the holy sword at once. Fear gripped the group as differing opinions arose about the identity of the figure before them. The magician speculated that perhaps they faced the wrath of the holy sword itself. This figure, he conjectured, was a deranged soul ensnared by the curse of those who perished in its pursuit, a tormented wanderer on an endless quest, leaving death in his wake. The magician could only conceive of this being as the so-called cursed spirit. Johnson proposed to his comrade whether he intended to claim responsibility for the overwhelming surge of mana, attributing it to himself rather than the dark spirit. The magician offered no response but urged the need for immediate departure, a suggestion the warrior vehemently opposed. Charging towards the enemy with incredible speed, the warrior asserted that even enraged spirits could be vanquished with precise strikes. Johnson attempted to land a blow on his opponent with his sword, yet at the final moment, Thoth seized the blade with his bare hand. In a split second, the adversary retaliated by striking Johnson in the face with the hilt of his sword. Though seemingly unremarkable in force, the blow sent the warrior hurtling sideways at considerable speed, crashing to the ground. Recognizing the opportune moment, the archer understood it was time to engage the enemy. Several arrows were unleashed simultaneously, yet the enemy skillfully deflected them with his sword. Perplexed by the enemy's ability to counter, the archer questioned the efficacy of his supposedly unerring arrows. It appeared irrelevant to the enemy what the arrows were called, as he continued his onslaught undeterred. Closing in on the archer, the enemy poised to strike with his sword until a noise behind him caught his attention. Recognizing the opening, the archer urgently called upon the magician to employ magic without delay. Without hesitation, the magician channeled destructive energy through his staff towards the enemy's body. Focusing his life force into the staff, the magician cast a flash spell, effecting a short-range teleportation. The archer realized the spell had no impact on the enemy, discerning the magician's true intent to escape. Thus, he lamented that, per the pirate code, they were bound to abandon those left behind, emphasizing the necessity for survival. His sentence was abruptly cut short as the enemy hurled his sword, the hilt striking him squarely on the forehead. Following the blow, the magician collapsed to the ground, motionless and devoid of any energy. Turning to the fallen magician, the archer inquired if he had caught their conversation prior to the attack. Ignoring the archer's question, the enemy instead queried if he possessed a holy sword. Initially avoiding eye contact, the archer admitted lacking such a significant artifact. Soon, both he and the magician lay unmoving on the ground. The enemy consolidated their bodies into a single pile, clearing the corridor. Upon doing so, he detected signs of life in the first warrior he had subdued, who managed to speak. Johnson disclaimed any involvement with undead entities, now comprehending the origin of the monstrous mana flow. Noting distinctive traits like blonde hair and deep turquoise eyes, Johnson identified him as none other than Warrior Falcon. Among all acquaintances, Johnson recognized only one who matched this description: the formidable Warrior Falcon. Overwhelmed with admiration, Johnson exclaimed his fandom and sought an autograph. Instead of granting the request, the man approached Johnson and gently placed his hand on his face. In a subdued tone, he affirmed that the warrior had fallen, his conviction unwavering. When Johnson attempted to inquire further, he was informed that the man had perished some 30 years prior. It was disclosed that the warrior vanished without a trace following a brutal and bloody conflict. The warrior vehemently protested, asserting the widely known tale of the warrior's disappearance alongside the holy sword, a story that Johnson insisted aligned with this man. Urging the man's return, Johnson implored him to heed the world's enduring memory of his legacy. Before Johnson could voice another plea, the man swiftly incapacitated him with a mere touch, rendering Johnson unconscious. With Johnson now prone on the floor, the man paused briefly before delivering his next words. Observing the propensity of certain individuals to prattle incessantly, particularly those lacking knowledge, the man remarked on their penchant for loud outcries, accusing the warrior of not only abandoning his comrades but also choosing survival at the cost of cowardice, compounded by the loss of the holy sword. The warrior, known as King the Strong at 56 years of age, had dedicated 3 decades to locating the holy sword. Transitioning once more, the scene unfolded into a fierce battle amidst one of history's grandest wars. The adversaries, now deceased, clamored loudly as they attempted to withdraw. Conversely, defenders of their homeland gripped their swords firmly, poised to vanquish all opposition. The troop commander incessantly urged his unit to stand firm and quell the rebellious forces. Employing horizontal attacks with devastating precision, He effortlessly cleaved through his foes with a single blow. They eagerly seized the opportunity to etch their names into the annals of history. Abruptly, the leader of a small unit overheard the nearby magician lamenting his depletion of mana. Standing nearby, the dwarf alerted that the enemies were launching another assault, urging everyone to ready themselves. Issuing commands to both his troops and comrades, the commander ordered an aggressive advance, recognizing that offense often proves the best defense. Pressing forward, he relentlessly engaged and dismantled foes on all sides. Yet, in a pivotal moment, an occurrence compelled him to halt, raising his sword defensively. A surge of energy pierced through the bodies of two knights standing close to the commander, indicating that the fiercest battle was yet to unfold. This ominous sign hinted that the most intense clash was yet to come. The dwarf reassured that everything would be all right, prompting the commander to acknowledge that, with the primary adversary now present, they must brace themselves once more. Before them stood none other than the Lord of the Dead, the foremost among the Dark Lord's 4 commanders. Known as the Phantom King, he unsheathed his sword, expressing his pleasure in meeting the commander and attempting to introduce himself. However, the commander swiftly interjected, refusing to entertain pleasantries until he finally relented. Discarding her helmet, the commander declared her refusal to engage with individuals of his ilk. Unveiling her true identity, the commander revealed herself to be a formidable swordswoman, one of the most powerful in their ranks. Identifying herself as Rebel Often, she vowed to personally vanquish the enemy this time. However, the dwarf, still by the commander's side, remarked that it seemed unnecessary this time, as amidst the throng of warriors, one figure stood out with his bare head and distinctive hair. It was Firkin himself who had joined the fray. When Israel often spotted him, she promptly beckoned him over. Firkin, expressing surprise, jestingly remarked on their apparent enjoyment without him, to which the Lord of the Dead chimed in, expressing his boredom. With a courteous apology, Firkin joked about not anticipating their revelry without him. Strong, addressing the enemy by name, inquired about his intentions and amusement in being there. The villain retorted that his name differed, but since his enemies bestowed no title upon him, he embraced this new moniker. Reflecting briefly, Strong acknowledged the logic but insisted on addressing him as the Named One henceforth. The Named One proceeded to retrieve a mysterious item from his bag, ordering its assembly at once. He ominously declared that there should be no doubt about its potency, as it would haunt its wielder in their darkest dreams. The Lord of the Dead chuckled, questioning the nature of this ominous artifact, which appeared to be some sort of enchanted sword. However, the warrior clarified that it was no ordinary weapon but a holy sword, capable of slaying the Lord of the Dead with a single stroke. The scene shifted, and where Firkin now stood, the sky was remarkably clear. Riding alongside others in a carriage, he incessantly repeated only 2 words. His gaze held a stark intensity, unsettling the companion riding beside him. The journey instilled great fear in him, yet he persevered, driven by the necessity of reaching his destination. After a duration, the cart halted, and the resilient Firkin recognized their arrival at the designated location. The cart's driver turned towards the passengers, announcing their arrival at the foreboding Terrible Valley. Exiting the cart, Strong Firkins remarked upon the verbose name bestowed upon the place. Another passenger described it as a haunt of ghosts, recounting tales of vanished travelers who dared to enter. Adding to the ominous atmosphere, rumors abounded of the Phantom King's residence, a name well known among the populace. This spectral ruler, the Lord of the Dead and the first among the 12 Ghost Kings, allegedly still resided within. Firkin speculated on the continued existence of the terrifying figure who cursed all living beings and commanded an army of spirits. Amidst the discussion, one passenger questioned Firkin's purpose in venturing here at his age, probing whether he truly sought to be here. Firkin nonchalantly expressed his curiosity about a legendary sword rumored to be within the valley. He replied that there was nothing special about it. He just heard that there was a legendary sword here, and so he came here to check. As Firkin suddenly hurled a wrapped object towards him, the inquisitive passenger found himself startled. Upon unwrapping the gift, the man discovered a magical blade from a forgotten citadel, radiating incredible power. Firkin explained it as compensation, cautioning against allowing its power to cloud their minds. Soon after, the cart sped away, leaving the recipient of the gift elated, waving his sword in various directions with joy. Now standing at the threshold, the warrior's sole focus was on the likelihood of finding the legendary sword at his intended destination. Taking cautious steps forward, his mind consumed by the certainty that his journey's culmination lay within these walls. Upon entry, he was met with a formidable horde of adversaries. Albeit lacking in intellect or swiftness, their dreadful shrieks filled the cavern. Unfazed by the spectacle, Firkin retrieved a small stick, swiftly silencing one of the undead with a firm blow to the head. He admonished the creature for its noisy demeanor, only to be met with an explanation of its anger management issues. Undeterred, Firkin pressed on, demanding the legendary sword, yet faced with confusion from the undead. A dead man, grappling with the situation, cited the prohibition against living intruders, placing the warrior in a quandary. As more undead gathered encircling the lone living soul, their inquiries turned to commands, urging him to depart if he valued his life. In response, the warrior once again resorted to force, striking another undead and demanding the sword, to no avail. An angered undead retaliated, attempting to strike Firkin, condemning his mockery of the dead. Unmoved, Firkin sought resolution through dialogue, expressing his hope for a mutual understanding. Displeased, the undead met his words with aggression, leading to a swift exchange of blows. As the confrontation escalated, the undead fell one by one, their bodies reduced to scattered remnants. In the aftermath, the cave bore witness to the aftermath of battle, strewn with the remnants of defeated foes. Perplexed, they questioned how physical harm could affect beings typically impervious to it. Unyielding, the warrior continued to wield the bone-like stick, declaring it was time for the dead to confront their fate. Faced with his resolve, the undead scattered, pleading to avoid a second demise. The man realized that he had proven his point. Violence could indeed serve as a means of communication. Amidst the chaos, Firkin discerned a familiar voice, identifying the source as the same intruder. Turning, he beheld a dead man standing alongside an apparition bearing a resemblance to his friend. The dead man bowed, entreating the Lord of the Dead for justice on behalf of the living intruder. Vladimir expressed surprise at encountering a living person, prompting the intruder to introduce himself. The man acknowledged the ruler's astonishment, noting the passage of time since their last encounter. He invited Vladimir to partake in the same revelry they enjoyed during their initial meeting, addressing him by a name. The villain pondered for a moment before recognition dawned upon him. Realization struck, revealing the figure before him as none other than the warrior known as Firkin the Strong. For a fleeting moment, the two old acquaintances locked eyes, until the warrior queried if the Lord of the Dead remembered him. A smile crept across Vladimir's face as he affirmed his vivid recollection of their past encounter. He confessed that he could never forget the face of the man who once dared to challenge his authority, remembering his name well: Warrior Firkin. The man then admonished the Lord of the Dead for his past misdeeds, insisting that he must now answer for his actions, as the warrior himself had aged into an old man. He urged the Lord to cast aside his concerns. Furthermore, he revealed that he was no longer a warrior, having long abandoned the name Firkin the Strong. This revelation surprised the villain, who scoffed at the notion of an elderly man suddenly seeking conflict. Seeking clarity, the Lord of the Dead questioned the man's motives, wondering if his presence was driven by a thirst for bloodshed. The man adamantly denied such intentions, explaining that he sought the legendary sword. Skeptical, the villain pressed him for clarification on the legendary sword, prompting the man to implore him not to feign ignorance. After a brief pause, Firkin asserted his knowledge of a weapon capable of rending the heavens, located within the vicinity. Pointing his stick towards the villain, he demanded its surrender, threatening death otherwise. Amused, the Lord of the Dead conceded the truth of the man's claim, confirming the sword's presence. However, he revealed a significant obstacle. He, the Lord of the Dead, was a lich, having transcended death itself. Confident in his superiority, he doubted the old warrior's ability to defeat him, exuding arrogance in his words. Undeterred, the man vowed to torment the Lord of the Dead until he begged for release. The villain questioned why Firkin, purported wielder of the Holy Sword, sought another blade. After a moment of contemplation, the warrior admitted in a subdued tone that he sought the legendary sword because he no longer possessed the Holy Sword. The villain asserted his recollection of the warrior's possession of the Holy Sword, but the man reiterated that he no longer possessed it. This statement elicited laughter and a smirk from the Lord, incredulous that the greatest warrior could have lost such a significant relic. He doubted the mighty warrior's intelligence, unable to fathom how he could have made such a mistake and misplaced such a powerful artifact. Suspecting deception, the villain entertained the notion of exploiting the warrior for his own agenda, believing him to be fabricating his true purpose for visiting the cave. In response, the man remarked on the Lord's persuasive tongue. Brandishing his stick, he declared a change of plans, expressing a desire for conversation. Though the man implied a dialogue of brute force, the villain understood the underlying threat and swiftly evaded. Attempting discourse, the Lord of the Dead sought to reason with Firkin, deeming the battle futile. However, the man appeared uninterested in conversation, his strikes growing more forceful with each blow. Seizing an opportunity, the warrior halted the first of the 4 commanders of the Dark Lord, allowing him to strike with his stick. An explosion ensued, scattering the Lord's body into dark particles. Despite the villain's assertions of superiority, Firkin remained unwavering in his focus. As the villain declared the land of the dead, Firkin maintained his resolve. Witnessing the transformation of his foes, he locked eyes with his opponent. In a place teeming with corpses, the villain proclaimed the impossibility of defeating the Lord of the Dead. With a commanding gesture, the Lord summoned a reaper, instructing it to eliminate the warrior. Confused by the sudden turn of events, the man swiftly closed the distance and struck his opponent repeatedly with his stick. Moments later, the formidable reaper materialized in the air, exuding potent energy. Yet, within moments, the reaper found itself immobilized, unable to act. It became apparent that the man had managed to restrain a crucial part of the reaper's essence with just one hand. The reaper remained silent, contemplating its next move as its physical form began to fade. In a whisper, it conceded that retreat might be the wisest course of action. However, the reaper's weapon remained in reality, now wielded by the warrior. Confronted by the sight, fear gripped the Lord of the Dead's dark soul. Realizing the perilous situation, the villain decided that retreat was the prudent choice, declaring the warrior a monstrous beast. The man laid claim to a portion of the reaper's weapon, issuing a countdown and demanding the sword from the villain before time expired. With a serious gaze, the Lord of the Dead understood the impending showdown, realizing he must exert all his strength to prevail. A maniacal smile graced the villain's face as he warned the warrior that this time, escape would not be so easy. His body pulsated with energy, manifesting sharp crystals that hurtled toward the warrior with lightning speed. He focused his gaze intently, anticipating the impact of the projectiles on the warrior's body. However, as the dust settled, the first of the Dark Lord's commanders realized that victory in this fight would not come easily. Before him stood Firkin, still clutching a portion of the Reaper's side, uttering only a single word. The villain's smile waned as he recognized the need for drastic measures. Drawing a sword, he vowed to demonstrate the skills he had honed over the past 30 years of separation. Within moments, he knelt before Firkin, presenting the sword to the warrior. Expressing satisfaction at the successful negotiation, the man acknowledged the culmination of his efforts. Observing from a safe distance, the dead lamented the humiliation of their leader. Meanwhile, the Lord of the Dead pondered what the warrior had been doing in the 30 years since their last encounter to become so formidable. His scrutiny of the sword betrayed a mix of curiosity and disbelief, prompting him to question its authenticity. The villain's voice trembled as he confirmed that it was indeed the legendary longsword. The man, astounded, repeated the phrase "long sword" aloud several times. Another pause followed, broken by the slow countdown to 3. With a deeper bow, the villain confessed that they never possessed the legendary sword. It was merely a rumor fabricated to lure adventurers. Amidst the recent plague outbreak and prolonged war, they ceased visiting the cave, resorting to deception as a means to collect souls. Firkin gathered his strength, inhaling deeply before shouting at the villain, demanding to know the purpose of revealing the truth. In response, the Lord merely laughed, prompting the warrior to declare that killing him served no purpose. He survived as he must. The villain found it incredulous that the warrior showed no inclination to harm him, seemingly willing to let him go. Firkin asserted that while he could indeed dispatch the villain at will, his initial intent in coming here did not involve such violence. Recognizing the futility of killing the Lord of the Dead, knowing he would likely resurrect, Firkin deemed it a waste of time. As he began to depart, Firkin paused, perturbed by a single word. Meanwhile, the villain approached his newfound acquaintance, expecting hero-like justice from the warrior. Suddenly, Firkin placed his hand on the Lord's shoulder, inquiring about the possibility of true resurrection, not as a mindless ghost, but in full form. He sought resurrection akin to that of a fully restored being. The Lord of the Dead scoffed at the notion, questioning if Firkin believed himself to be a divine dragon capable of miracles. However, he admitted the possibility of summoning a soul and placing it into another body, a practice associated with witches. As he chuckled, the Lord of the Dead felt Firkin's grip tighten on his shoulder, his confusion mounting. Firkin's demeanor shifted to madness as he whispered his demand for the creation of a lich. The scene transitioned to a forest where a fully armored knight traversed, accompanied by a hooded figure. Alongside the knight moved a cloaked man, their purpose yet to be revealed. As they journeyed, they unwittingly drew the attention of a small gang of forest bandits notorious for their robberies. Perceiving the travelers as easy prey, the bandits emerged from hiding to carry out their nefarious deeds. The knight clad in iron armor confronted the bandits, warning them to depart or face the consequences. However, in a sudden turn of events, one of the bandits loosed an arrow, striking the knight in the head. Another bandit approached the hooded man, demanding their valuables under threat of death. Unfazed, the hooded man channeled energy into the fallen knight's corpse, deriding the bandit's folly. Expressing disbelief at the bandits' audacity, he marveled at their misguided decision to attack. Grumbling, the knight warned the bandits that he had nothing to offer but a painful demise in the depths of the forest. The bandits recoiled in fear as the reanimated corpse spoke, their terror evident on their faces. The apparent leader of the bandits dismissed the phenomenon as a trick, insisting on targeting the one who revived the corpse. Yet, when the bandit's sword made contact with the hooded man's body, it shattered into fragments. In a calm voice, the hooded man recounted a past disagreement with his son over who would first strip the bandits of their clothes. He described how his son, with scorching heat akin to lava, incinerated the bandits' garments, leaving only charred remains. Ultimately, the son's true desire was to unveil the world's corruption, purging evil and liberating its victims from their oppressive armor. Above the man's head emerged a sizable fiery orb as he cried out passionately that it alone could liberate humanity from its shackles and absolve their sins. Sinners' screams echoed, beckoning death, while a fiery sphere drove the bandits into retreat. The hooded figure maintained his menacing facade for a time, continuing to shout in an attempt to intimidate the bandits. However, his stamina waned swiftly, and he ceased expending energy to sustain the fireball overhead. With this, it became evident that the hood could now be removed, revealing the true identity of the man, had any bandits remained to witness it. Clad in iron armor, one individual argued that destroying everything to capture a single bandit was unreasonable. The warrior countered, revealing that despite its appearance, the fireball contained no substance. He further remarked that even the Lord of the Dead seemed to possess a knack for survival, having endured an arrow to the head. The first of the Dark Lord's 4 commanders removed his helmet, disclosing his lich status and dismissing such injuries as inconsequential. The bandit who had struck the warrior lay on the ground, stripped down to his undergarments. His attire now belonged to the Lord of the Dead, who lamented the need for frequent costume changes and identity concealment. The warrior reassured him that it would be worse if word got out that a lich was lurking nearby. Mentioning potential complications with the church, the warrior cautioned, but the Lord of the Dead remained unfazed by religious threats. Most crucial to Furkan was ensuring that the Lord of the Dead remained unharmed as per their agreement. The defeated lich found little satisfaction in his role in these adventures. When the warrior conversed with the Lord of the Underworld regarding his need to consume one individual with his lich and restore them to life, the lich countered that such an act couldn't equate to the creation of mindless undead. In death, every existence is destined for obscurity. It proved to be both a boon and a bane. The antagonist warned the warrior of the risks involved in defying this natural order. Was Furkan truly prepared to undertake this endeavor solely to revive his erstwhile comrade as a being universally reviled? Without much contemplation, the warrior asserted his indifference, driven solely by his quest for the sword. Indeed, the necessity of this lich stemmed from the fact that his old friend was the custodian of the holy sword. Consequently, Furkan implored the Lord of the Underworld for assistance in this matter. Upon the villain's contemplation of the proposal, he noticed the tension in the warrior's muscles and veins. After a brief pause, they sealed their agreement with a handshake, and the lich suggested the need for meticulous preparation of the deceased's body. The heart of the deceased, an eye adept at seeking souls, and a portion of a pig's carcass were deemed essential components. However, the lich speculated that the pig's carcass might be dispensable, leading to the warrior's interruption and request for clearer instructions. With that settled, Furkan preferred direct guidance over further explanation, eager to proceed. Thus, Furkan and the Lord of the Underworld found themselves alone in the forest, embarking on their journey. As they ventured further, a grin spread across the lich's face, signaling their arrival at their destination. Before them sprawled an ancient forest, often referred to by locals as the Elven Garden. The man inquired once more if the heart of the forest truly lay within this realm. In response, the Lord explained that the resurrection of a deceased being necessitates a toll, a sacrifice. For an ordinary individual, a pig would suffice. However, if the individual in question was a great wizard, the sacrifice demanded would be far more substantial. Up to this juncture, everything seemed comprehensible. Yet, Hartina remained puzzled by one detail. Why did all these events coincide with the location of their long-lost friend's abode? A small detachment of soldiers took up discreet positions, awaiting their quarry. They maintained utmost silence, observing their target, ready to strike at the opportune moment. Some among them were gripped by fear as the target rapidly closed the distance to their positions. When one soldier remarked that a bear stood before them, another corrected him, identifying it as the true guardian of the forest. Their mission that day was to subdue this guardian and dispatch it on the spot. A fellow warrior advocated for an immediate assault, but his companion disagreed with the tactic. Initially dismissing it as jest, the soldier grew alarmed as his comrade, armed with a sword, dashed from the bushes. Upon reaching the bear, the soldier struck, eliciting a resounding clang characteristic of metal. The resounding clang signaled the sword's collision with an iron object, splitting it into two as the soldier lowered his gaze. Weaponless now, he found himself noticed by the forest guardian, who turned to confront him. Without hesitation, the creature unleashed a powerful blow, swiftly incapacitating the intruder. In an instant, the bandit's lifeless form lay upon the forest floor. The bear, sensing the presence of other similar threats nearby, remained vigilant. The soldier's commander, gripped by fear, faced the reality of the furious beast before him, urged by his subordinates to defend themselves with all their might. Suddenly, a hand landed on the commander's shoulder, accompanied by a calm voice drawing near. Cloaked in anonymity, the figure declared further casualties futile, asserting his intention to resolve the situation. Locking eyes with the bear, he assured in a hushed tone that he would address the issue promptly. Unacquainted with his identity, the soldiers pondered, while one among them recognized him from tales, elated to witness his legendary power firsthand. None other than the renowned wizard Adao, whose feats were whispered about in nearby settlements, stepped forward. The bear, cautious as any creature would be, moved slowly, mirroring the deliberate stillness of the wizard. Their interaction unfolded in a tension-laden stillness, marked by the bear's cautious movements and the wizard's composed stance. Observing the shift in atmosphere with the wizard's arrival, the soldiers exchanged remarks, acknowledging the palpable change. After moments of tense anticipation, the wizard abruptly raised his hand, pointing forward with purpose. With a beckoning gesture, the wizard invited the bear closer, astonishing and heartening the soldiers. Observing the audacious taunt directed at their formidable adversary, the soldiers marveled at the wizard's boldness. Enraged anew, the bear charged toward its foe, intent on rending him with its powerful claws. Yet, the wizard, anticipating the attack, assumed a defensive stance mere moments before the bear closed in. In a swift exchange, the bear lashed out with its paw, but Adil stood his ground, unmoved. Swiftly evading the blow, Adil shifted his body to the left, exploiting the bear's cumbersome movements. Taking advantage of the bear's size and limited agility, Adil struck a precise blow to its liver. The soldiers erupted in disbelief as the wizard landed a hit on the bear's heavily armored flank. Recognizing the need for further action, Adil evaded the bear's retaliatory strike, preparing for another assault. Seizing an opportune moment, Adil delivered a forceful kick to the bear's head, inflicting significant damage. Despite its struggle, the bear remained conscious and combat-ready, rising to its feet with considerable effort. Undeterred, Adil, drawing upon his strength and focus, unleashed a series of strikes to incapacitate his opponent. Though the bear managed to block the onslaught, Adil persisted, preparing to deliver a decisive blow. In a swift turn of events, the bear retaliated with a powerful blow, catching Adil off guard, leaving him vulnerable to the attack. Embracing the incoming force, Adil chose to absorb it with a solid block, maintaining his stance as his body absorbed the impact. Despite the movement, Adil remained rooted in place, his focus unwavering as he faced his adversary. One soldier remarked on the expected challenge posed by such a formidable opponent, while another expressed disappointment at the lack of visible magic from the mage. In response, his companion asserted that the true magic lay in Adil's ability to contend with the bear using only his bare hands. As they conversed, Adil retrieved a small stick from his back, preparing to confront the enraged bear. Meanwhile, Firkin and the Lord of the Dead continued their journey through the forest, with the warrior intending to convey something to his companion. Alerting the Lich to their entry into the forest dwellers' territory, Firkin advised vigilance from that point onward. Pressing forward, they discussed the presence of elves in the area, anticipating potential encounters with the forest guardians. Firkin emphasized the forest owner's notorious temper, urging caution to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Reassured, the Lich shared a tale of a particularly malevolent character known for destructive tendencies. Midway through his revelation, the warrior fell silent, his thoughts consumed by a sudden realization. Continuing their journey, Firkin's sudden movement startled the Lich, who instinctively assumed a defensive posture. To the Lich's surprise, the warrior resumed his stride unperturbed, paying little heed to his companion. As they progressed, Firkin observed the devastation ahead, signaling their approach to an area ravaged by destruction. The villain speculated that giant beavers might be responsible for the destruction, but the man countered, noting that forest dwellers typically didn't engage in such behavior. Just as the warrior began to surmise the true culprit, a spear whizzed past, embedding itself into the ground with force. The thundering sound of approaching hooves followed as a horse raced toward them. The soldiers assumed a defensive stance as they neared, awaiting further orders. Mounted on the horse, the unit's commander addressed the couple, questioning the human interference in the forest. Aware of the historical conflict between the forest guardians and humans, the warrior pondered if allegiances had shifted. The commander warned of consequences for resistance, demanding compliance. Asserting their authority, he identified their unit as the Concerned. The Lord of the Dead confronted the commander, prompting him to inquire about their identities. Before the Lich could respond, Firkin interjected, claiming they were merely passing travelers. However, he couldn't resist mentioning that the area belonged to the Forest Guardians. After a moment of contemplation, the commander revealed their mission: to reclaim ancestral lands from the forest inhabitants. The forest had become the focal point of a conquest campaign, and the commander implied consequences for civilians entering a war zone. Warning of martial law, he signaled their readiness to enforce it. Purple energy enveloped the Lord of the Dead as tension escalated, only dissipating at the man's command to stand down. Speaking calmly, he advised him to lessen the unnecessary noise. Then, addressing the commander more assertively, suggested they return and advised him to maintain his focus on his duties. Just as they were about to disappear into the foliage, the commander, seated atop his horse, turned towards the Lord of the Dead at the very last moment. Remarking on the striking resemblance to the wanted bandit, he insisted on seeing his face. Unable to bear it any longer, the Lord of the Dead inquired of the warrior whether it was time to dispatch them all. The man paused to contemplate, recognizing the intrusion of the King of People into the Guardian's forest lands, much to his annoyance. Standing beside the commander, a soldier suddenly gestured towards a bush, urging him to investigate. There lay the massive corpse of a bear, catching the commander's swift attention due to its unusual size. Gazing up, he spotted a small group of individuals clustered around the bear's carcass. Among them stood the wizard Atal, gleefully rubbing his hands together, proclaiming the completion of their mission. The commander found it hard to believe the wizard had truly felled the beast, but the wizard merely affirmed it was his duty. Considering rumors of Adil once slaying an ogre bare-handed, such feats were not entirely surprising. He remarked that one could expect nothing less from a magician, as performing tasks seemingly by magic was the crux of their craft. Amidst their conversation, the warrior decided to approach the lifeless bear to inspect it more closely. It dawned on him that this creature fit the description of their quarry, leading him to acknowledge the wizard's considerable power. Deep in thought, Firkin found himself abruptly confronted by two soldiers, their spears menacingly close to his face. Observing the scene, the commander remarked on Firkin's apparent madness, offering him a chance to depart peacefully. With a stern voice, the troop commander declared Firkin's immediate execution in accordance with martial law. After a brief pause, the commander granted Firkin the opportunity to speak his final words. Firkin remained silent for a moment before uttering just a single word. In that instant, an arrow pierced through the commander's body, nearly transfixing him on his horse. Moments later, more arrows rained down on the bewildered soldiers, who struggled to discern the source of the attack. Helpless and lacking reinforcements, the soldiers found themselves in a dire predicament without cover or support. Survivors clamored to organize, recognizing the ambush and hastily forming defensive formations. The assailants revealed themselves to be elves, led by a commanding girl who ordered the annihilation of their foes. The elf commander directed a chilling message toward the remaining soldiers, asserting that intruders in their forest would serve as fertilizer for its trees. With swift precision, the elves unleashed a volley of arrows at their adversaries in response. Faced with the onslaught, the soldiers struggled to evade the rapid barrage of arrows. Notably, the soldiers also counted mages among them, positioned closer to the commander to shield him. These mages erected a formidable barrier, bolstered by their magical energies, prompting one to inquire about the commander's well-being amidst the chaos. He admitted to dropping his guard and expressed disbelief that the elven adversaries had maintained their ambush undetected for so long. Urging his horse forward, he directed the magicians to hold the defense as he called for reinforcements. With enemies breaching their defenses, the magician and remaining soldiers found it increasingly challenging to sustain their resistance. Meanwhile, Firkin observed the unfolding events until a suspicious noise caught his attention from behind. As an arrow whizzed past, he evaded it and criticized the commander's decision to abandon his troops. Despite more arrows coming his way, Firkin deftly dodged them and advised the soldiers to follow suit. The Lord of the Dead inquired about when he could start eliminating everyone present, but Firkin suggested focusing on evasion instead. Notably, he opted to bring in the wizard Adele, who adeptly deflected incoming arrows with a peculiar staff. Impressively, Adele even intercepted arrows with his bare hands, halting them just before reaching his body. Demonstrating flair, he shattered arrows with swift hand movements, enhancing his persona. One of the Dark Lord's 4 commanders acknowledged the warrior's skill, prompting Firkin to liken him to his younger self. Abruptly, Adil surrendered, revealing himself as a mere mercenary. Someone approached, objecting to the mercenary's surrender given the dire circumstances. An elf, unmasking herself, warned of the dire fate awaiting those who provoke the forest's wrath. Surprised, the Lord of the Dead and his attendant realized they were facing a genuine dark elf, a rare and formidable adversary. With a booming voice, he opted to inquire of the girl what the dark elf had left behind, but she seemed displeased with his choice of words. Her outcry began, branding the cloaked figure as a bigot, demanding immediate execution. Firkin approached her, proposing to resolve the matter then and there. The unsettling realization dawned that the adversary had managed to approach so closely and inconspicuously. Moments later, the warrior remarked that the girl's emotions were transparent, and when she remained silent, he inquired if she remembered him. He reminisced about their playful interactions and piggyback rides from her childhood, fond memories for him. Enraged, the girl unleashed an arrow from her bow, accusing the human of disrespect. With a swift motion, he deflected the arrow, suggesting they engage in civil discourse instead. The elf, however, rebuffed the notion, refusing dialogue with the human she deemed degenerate. She lamented the breach of the non-aggression pact by the strangers who had encroached upon their lands. Her perspective of humans was tainted by their history of forest destruction and persecution of her kin. Firkin absorbed her grievances before subtly hinting at the necessity of a different approach to communication. Employing a somersault, he maneuvered closer to the motionless bear's body on the ground. Employing a mysterious technique, he commanded the bear to revert to its true form, addressing it as Druid Garm. It became apparent to onlookers that the bear was, in fact, a human in disguise. The elf readied another arrow, commanding the warrior to withdraw his grimy hands from the bear's form. Firkin's response was a laugh, recognizing his advantageous position. Swiftly, he hoisted the druid by the neck, declaring the need for immediate negotiations. Within moments, the elf realized the druid's true predicament, ensnared by the warrior. Firkin's tone shifted, emphasizing the importance of elven attention if they wished to safeguard their esteemed sir. Before the man could finish his warning, the elf launched an explosive arrow. Amidst the fading explosion, the elf denounced any negotiation with the invaders. Even as the dust settled, Firkin, undeterred, addressed the elves, expressing surprise at the girl's irrational behavior, given the near-fatal outcome for Sir Gum. Perplexity lingered over how a mana arrow failed to dispatch a seemingly stationary forest wanderer. The Lord of the Dead quietly addressed Firkin as the Lich King, audible only to the warrior. Firkin, now viewing his adversaries with disdain, remarked upon their appalling conduct, suggesting correction. Unwilling to heed him, the elves unleashed a barrage of their most potent arrows. Seizing the opportunity, the Lord of the Dead erected an impenetrable energy barrier around himself and the warrior. As the arrows shattered against the protective shield, he proceeded with his next technique, placing his hand upon the chilled ground. Instantly, the fallen soldiers began to rise, prompted by the Lord of the Dead's directive to convene, their new mission being to instill proper manners in the elves. The scene shifted to an outpost of a nearby human army, not far from the previous location. Within the largest tent, a loud scream pierced the air, emanating from the general. The cause of his outburst was an intruder entering his tent, already fueling his anger. However, upon seeing his subordinate bringing a zebra, the general's demeanor shifted to amusement, expressing fondness for such peculiarities. As the subordinates and the zebra entered, the general noticed another visitor, appearing gravely injured. It was the commander of the small unit who informed the general of their entrapment. Acknowledging the shame of their situation, the commander revealed they had been surrounded while interrogating suspicious individuals. The general's curiosity was piqued by these suspects, prompting the commander to provide further details: an old man and a mysterious hooded figure. Contemplation followed, as the general had been searching for such strangers for a considerable time. Turning to one of the warriors in the tent, he inquired if they had encountered them. Recognized as prominent figures in the region, the commander swiftly identified the warrior's snow-white armor, realizing his affiliation with the army, serving under the king in the highest order of knighthood. Seizing the opportunity, the general asked the commander about the old man's distinct features: blonde hair, blue eyes, and a scar across his face. Confirming the account, he remarked on the unsettling nature of the old man, suggesting his demise at the hands of the elves who spared no one. As they exited the tent, he whispered to the commander that if indeed they sought the same individual, the elves likely had already dealt with him. The general found it incredulous that the target of the knight's pursuit warranted attention from the highest order of knighthood. Warning the general against delving further into the matter, he cautioned that ignorance often ensured better rest, hinting at potential danger in seeking more information. With a new objective in mind, he enlisted the commander's aid in its fulfillment. Specifically, the warrior requested the commander's guidance to the last known whereabouts of the old man. The scene shifted to the Temple of the Guardians of the Forest, nestled at the base of the hidden tree. Within a clandestine chamber, several elves performed rituals customary during times of adversity. 3 high elves and an elder convened, sensing a looming threat to their forest hinted by celestial signs. The elder's gaze emanated energy as he peered beyond mortal limits, discerning imminent danger. Yet the visions in the scrying vessel revealed more than the high elves anticipated, including a subordinate dozing in the kitchen. Guided by the high elves, the elder beheld the capture of Gamma and Daram by unknown assailants. Notably, they clarified that it wasn't agents of the Steel Empire responsible for the abduction. This shadowy figure, long concealed, elicited relief among the elves at the emergence of Firkin the Strong. The battlefield bore a ghastly sight, with the once vibrant grass now stained crimson with fresh blood. The scent of death hung heavy in the air, unmistakably signaling the recent occurrence of a brutal conflict. Orn and the commander stood in silence, their expressions speaking volumes without the need for words. The commander acknowledged the grim reality that their forces had been defeated, allowing the enemy, along with the elves, to slip away. In a curious gesture, the elder knelt down, scooping up a handful of soil to examine it closely. Upon tasting the earth, he was immediately overcome with searing pain radiating through his skull. It became evident that dark magic was at play, leaving no doubt as to its malevolent presence. The desecration of the land bore witness to the corrupting influence of dark sorcery upon the environment. Though the commander entertained the notion that the old man might be a practitioner of dark arts, the reality often proved otherwise. Despite his disheveled appearance, the old man, a revered hero, was not one to concern himself with trivial matters such as grooming. As the elder spoke of legendary feats and the mention of a sacred blade, the commander inferred his true identity as a seasoned warrior. Regretfully, the commander's ill-advised remark sealed his fate, prompting a swift and fatal strike from the elder's sword. With a single decisive motion, the elder executed a lethal blow, causing blood to spurt forth from the commander's neck. Acknowledging the commander's competence and guidance, the elder expressed gratitude with his final breath. As life ebbed away, the commander found himself without answers, his demise orchestrated by the very individual he had trusted. He came to the realization that the warrior had chosen a solitary path, a choice he personally disdained. Confirming the whispers he had heard, it appeared that the warrior had indeed allied himself with the Ghost King. What remained unclear to him now was the extent to which the once respected Falcon was willing to stoop in pursuit of his objectives. As events unfolded, the focus shifted, with the warrior and the Lord of the Dead traversing the forest accompanied by their spectral captives. Amidst the chaos, the elf persisted in her demands, urging the driver to engage her in combat immediately, rather than turning his back on her. Growing increasingly intolerant of her incessant cries, the warrior contemplated whether the Lord of the Dead possessed a spell to silence her. The Lord merely chuckled, remarking on the elf's apparent nobility, as he refrained from simply disposing of their troublesome captives. However, Firkin interjected, revealing that the elf was his niece, and thus warranted a degree of gentleness. Despite Firkin's familial concern, the warrior harbored more selfish intentions, viewing the elf as a means to access the essence of the forest. Renowned for its enigmatic power, the essence of the forest had been revered by the guardians for generations, making it a coveted prize. Recognizing the leverage that threatening the lives of the elves could provide, the warrior plotted to obtain the essence through coercion. Upon hearing the elf's protests, the warrior dismissed her outburst as a display of immaturity, asserting his authority over her. With the mercenary now privy to their motivations, he pressed for an explanation, only to find himself denied release. Observing from the sidelines, he found himself in a situation that hardly seemed fair to him. Firkin was informed that, regrettably, the barrier couldn't be dispelled without disrupting the spell, necessitating patience until negotiations concluded. The elf countered the warrior's misconception, emphasizing that the essence of the ancient forest, integral to their divine heritage, couldn't be simply handed over to him. As the essence constituted the foundation of the ancient forest and their divine lineage, it was not subject to discussion by outsiders. Admitting his limited knowledge on the matter, the man urged all to hope for smooth proceedings, warning of dire consequences should things go awry. He issued a stark warning. Should negotiations fail, he would raze the entire forest and seize the essence by force. Reacting strongly, the elf dismissed his threats, belittling him as a feeble old man. However, Druid Garm's awakening signaled a realization that the man, identified as the formidable warrior Firkin, wasn't bluffing. With some improvement in his condition, he divulged information previously unknown to those in the cell. It was difficult to reconcile the image of the rude, beggar-like figure with the legendary hero he turned out to be. Echoing Garm's revelation, Gon confirmed that the disheveled individual was indeed the warrior who vanished 3 decades ago with the Holy Sword. Recollecting her childhood memories, the elf recalled instances where she was carried on Firkin's shoulders. Suddenly, the druid humbled himself, recognizing Firkin as a fellow warrior and a great hero. Falling to his knees, he paid homage to the esteemed warrior, acknowledging him as a brother in arms and a champion. Firkin downplayed the reverence, cautioning against excessive praise, while the Lord of the Dead suggested such flattery often masked deception. The elf urged them to stand tall, resisting the urge to bow before the elderly man. However, the druid simply inquired of his longtime companion the reason for his presence here. Furthermore, he pondered the whereabouts of the warrior during these tumultuous times, questioning why he vanished when disaster struck anew. With the Dark Lord's remnants still posing a threat, former blood allies turned their weapons against each other. Gan explained that these actions resulted in consequences visible to Firkins himself, especially since the human king, once like a brother, committed irreparable harm to the sacred forest. He queried the warrior if he truly remained oblivious to the cries of the trees and unaffected by the loss of countless brethren slain by humans. Indeed, a warrior could have averted such tragedy rather than passively observing from the sidelines. The druid's voice crescendoed as he implored Firkin to halt the bloody conflict. After brief contemplation, the warrior defiantly refused, prompting genuine shock from Adam. Walking away from the group, he expressed his sole desire for the essence of the forest, expressing regret for the unfolding circumstances. Garm admonished that such behavior was unbecoming of a warrior, but Firkin retorted that much had changed since he relinquished that title. Sensing an internal obligation to intervene, the man recognized that failure to act would only exacerbate the situation. The elf disparaged Garm, labeling the warrior as despicable and speculating that he may have erected the barrier. Exhausted from the discourse, Firkin declared an end to the conversation, warning that further disturbance would be met with a silencing spell. The group pressed on until the warriors abruptly halted in the midst of their journey. Observing this, the Lord of the Dead turned to his superior, questioning the sudden pause. In the same instant, an object hurtled toward the Lord with alarming velocity. The warrior discerned that these projectiles were nothing but tree roots manipulated to attack. Merely being aware was insufficient. Swift bodily movements were necessary to dodge the onslaught. The barrage persisted until the warrior managed to retreat beyond their reach. Facing away from the Lord of the Dead, he inquired about the integrity of the barrier. Swiveling his head, he noticed a breach in the barrier wrought by those very roots. Firkin surmised that the elves likely hadn't ventured far, urging the Lord to pursue them immediately. Yet, it had been some time since he last saw his old friend, whom he now spotted perched on a tree branch. This elf was among the most prominent denizens of the forest. His gaze bore a gravity suggesting readiness for confrontation with the warrior. Shedding his outer garments, Firkin queried if his friend had journeyed all this way out of concern for his daughter, while the warrior himself merely sought a visit. Extending his arms, he suggested it was time for old friends to reconnect. Massive roots from the forest trees surged in various directions, bursting forth from the earth. Despite wielding a spectral weapon, the Lord of the Dead found it exceedingly challenging to sever the onslaught of roots, not due to their inherent strength, but their sheer speed and abundance. Meanwhile, the warrior channeled all his strength and focus into dealing maximum damage to the adversary. Each punch he delivered could cleave a root in twain effortlessly. Amidst this, he instructed the Lord of the Dead to disregard the roots and swiftly pursue the fleeing elves. Despite his actions, he appeared unperturbed, as if tearing apart wooden roots bare-handed was a trivial feat. The first of the Dark Lord's 4 commanders pledged obedience to this command. Meeting his gaze, the warrior cautioned against any notion of escape, vowing to pursue him instead of the holy sword. The Lord of the Dead assured him there was no need for concern, as he harbored a desire to claim the warrior's soul himself. Employing a technique, he dissipated his form into the air, prompting a quiet whisper from Firkin, expressing a preference not to meet a mundane demise in the forest. In that moment, doubt crept into the man's mind. It became challenging to maintain trust in this creature. Nevertheless, he resolved to set aside such thoughts and focus on the immediate problem at hand. Facing the forest elder, the warrior suggested it was time for a private conversation. As the elder approached, tension hung thick in the air. The elder began listing Firkin's various monikers: Dragon Killer, Lightbringer, and Impudent Devil, hinting at a complicated history between them. The elder remarked that the man was now entirely unrecognizable, bearing little resemblance to the warrior he once knew. In his eyes, the warrior appeared significantly more weathered and unappealing since their last encounter. Expressing disdain for the unkempt beard and tattered attire, he bluntly likened his old friend to the strongest of vagabonds. Hearing this, the warrior silently simmered before rebuking the elder, admonishing him for such harsh words to a friend after 3 decades of separation. The elf asserted his elevated status as not just an elder but now the paramount guardian of the forest. This declaration elicited laughter from the man, who congratulated him on his significant promotion. Subsequently, the elves brandished their weapon, a large head, and struck the warrior's position. Amidst the assault, the elf managed to shout directives at the druid, compelling him to adopt a more respectful tone. Noticing the change in the druid's demeanor, the warrior discerned Alpha's transformation into a more conventional elder, devoid of his former intrigue. As he readied to retaliate, Root suddenly ensnared his limbs. Swinging his mace in a desperate maneuver, Firkin found himself overwhelmed by the relentless onslaught. Subsequently, he was sent hurtling through the air upon impact, crashing to the ground. The elf summoned even more roots, condemning Firkin's recklessness in attacking the forest guardians after 3 decades of absence. Accusing him of bringing a malevolent sorcerer into the sacred domain only added insult to injury. Concurrently, a massive root was directed into the warrior's body, intending to rend him asunder from within. The man seized hold of the root, halting it with his own hands, while calling out to the elf with an intriguing revelation. Specifically, he disclosed that the forest guardians were the initial assailants. Grasping the root firmly, he struck the elf, prompting a momentary retreat as the elf attempted to regain stability. As the warrior charged towards the enemy, he voiced his frustration. "And what now? What changes? Not even the forest elder's prowess." This strike could have proven fatal for the elf had he not deflected it with his weapon. Recoiling from the blow, the elf expressed skepticism about the warrior's motives for returning. The man chose not to engage, but instead tightened his grip on the elf's weapon. He declared his disinterest in their conflict with humans, emphasizing his sole pursuit of the essence of the forest. Upon hearing this, the elf was momentarily dazed, the world around him seeming to blur. Sensing an opportunity, the warrior swiftly launched a kick at the disoriented elf. The elf staggered back, clutching his stomach from the force of the blow. Now in Firkin's possession, the elder's weapon, he acknowledged its long tenure under elven care. He vowed to return it promptly to Yoda once its use was fulfilled. Initially silent, the elf then derided the warrior, insinuating senility with age. With a gesture, the elf summoned more roots from the earth, elevating himself slightly. It's clear he opposes handing the artifact to Firkin, thus he expressed a desire for a peaceful resolution, though it seemed unlikely. Once more, he implored the elf to resolve the matter without unnecessary conflict and loss. In a subdued tone, the forest elder assured that he would consider sharing, sparking a glimmer of hope in the man's eyes. However, in the next moment, the elf unleashed a barrage of roots aimed directly at his adversary, poised to rend him asunder. Yet Firkin merely lifted his head, remarking his expectation that verbal agreement was unattainable. Demonstrating remarkable agility, he began to ascend the roots, closing the distance to his foe. Enraged, the elf demanded to know why the essence of the forest was coveted by his adversary. Declaring it sacred and thus unbestowable, he adamantly refused to yield the object to anyone. At this juncture, the man felt compelled to divulge his need for the item to revive someone. While the elf gathered energy in his hands, the warrior disclosed his intention to use it to prevent severe harm. Leveraging his opponent's weapon, he propelled himself from the root, swiftly positioning above the elf's head. In a blink, he vanished from the elf's sight, leaving the elf bewildered by his sudden disappearance. Peering upward, the elf found no trace of his opponent. Meanwhile, Firkin expressed his desire to revive a long-standing ally. The elf then realized his opponent's superior speed as another subtle movement rippled through the air. Before him stood a warrior launching a swift kick aimed at the elf's head. The scene flashed before the warrior's eyes, cradling his brother's lifeless, bloodied form, disbelief washing over him. The same grim tableau confronted the elf, but for him it was too late. Suddenly, a small root, pulsing with energy, materialized in the elf's grasp. The locus of action shifted, indicating the true whereabouts of the forest elder. Perplexed, he couldn't fathom Firkin the Strong's relentless pursuit of the artifact in the midst of battle. The forest elder's body became ensconced in roots, a sight that bewildered the man. He observed in silence as his opponent's form fragmented into pieces. It bore resemblance to the root clone technique frequently employed by the forest elder in battle. As the battle subsided, clarity dawned on the warrior's mind, a familiar post-conflict clarity. Realizing he had overstepped, he vowed to contemplate the consequences after resurrecting his ally as a lich. Pausing momentarily, he pondered the Phantom King, the Lord of the Dead, tasked with capturing escapees. Surely the Phantom King, with his mastery, should have no issue, or so he assumed. Yet reality proved more perilous than anticipated, revealing unforeseen dangers lurking beneath the surface. As the man pressed on, he soon spotted something intriguing on the ground. Recognizing it as a trap, he halted his steps immediately. Resembling a magic circle with a reverse glyph, this trap utilized tree roots for camouflage, making detection challenging. The more mana expended within, the greater the release in the opposite direction, ensnaring the unwitting intruder. Yet this trap wasn't solitary. It was part of a more intricate system. A simple steel wire stretched between trees, seemingly easy to spot, yet cunningly coated with a neural paralytic, a hallmark of the forest guardian. This toxin was so potent that even a mere scratch could incapacitate a giant. What intrigued him most was how even the Phantom King fell victim to these seemingly rudimentary ploys. It was baffling, leading him to speculate whether this was truly the Phantom King or perhaps a lesser entity, at most the Phantom Count. With seemingly no alternative, he reluctantly resigned to the inevitable, resorting to force to obtain what he sought. It appeared there was no avoiding it. If this was the situation, he had to confront it head-on, despite his reluctance. Thus, he prepared himself mentally for the inevitable confrontation, acknowledging that he had to fight his way through to achieve his goal. Assessing his surroundings, he determined the direction he needed to proceed, but not before a brief warm-up. In an instant, he set off in the chosen direction, a flurry of dust and debris trailing in his wake. Unbeknownst to him, an observer perched on a nearby branch shielded their face from the approaching dust, silently tracking his movements. A smile graced his lips as realization dawned that the warrior had been located, signaling the imminent resolution of the matter. The scene shifted to the shrine of the forest guardian, nestled at the base of a towering tree known as Yuan. Nearby lay the settlement's underground prison, locally dubbed the Root Prison, cloaked in darkness save for the flickering light of torch-bearing guards. Amidst this gloom, a guard escorted the Lord of the Dead, promptly consigning him to the depths of the prison. As the guard departed, he dubbed the new arrival a dark magician, an epithet that sparked offense from the Lord of the Dead. Undeterred, he settled into his confines, contemplating his next move until a voice from an adjacent cell interrupted his thoughts. It was a fellow prisoner, remarking on the Lord of the Dead's appearance, suggesting expectations of a more imposing figure. Ignoring the comment, the Lord of the Dead refrained from inquiring about the speaker's identity or the source of their knowledge. In response, the voice introduced itself as Adil, revealing insight gained from a lifelong mentorship. Recognition dawned on the Lord of the Dead as he realized his fellow captive was the same hapless mercenary ensnared once before. Amused, he teased the mercenary about his penchant for falling into captivity. Playing along, he remarked that the mercenary ought to learn to decline offers of capture. The revelation that Adil's teacher was acquainted with the Lord of the Dead piqued curiosity, raising questions about the teacher's background. Adil admitted knowing little about his enigmatic mentor, acknowledging a murky past but certain of one defining fact. So, it turns out that his teacher was once a bona fide lich. The Lord of the Dead expressed skepticism, noting that it was unheard of for one of the 12 witches to train an ordinary soldier, let alone someone not versed in dark magic. Despite the mercenary's claim to be a magician, the Lord of the Dead remained unconvinced, prompting the mercenary to attempt to prove his magical prowess. To further astonish the Lord of the Dead, the mercenary revealed that his teacher was the elusive 13th witch. This revelation surprised the Lord greatly, as his knowledge suggested that leeches ceased appearing after the 12th. Regardless of whether his claims were believed, the mercenary disclosed this information with the ulterior motive of persuading the Lord of the Dead to aid in their escape. While the idea of escape appealed to him, the Lord of the Dead noted the obstacle of their enchanted shackles. These shackles amplified resistance with the usage of mana, making escape attempts more futile. Attempting to forcibly channel magical energy would only exacerbate their predicament. Observing the mercenaries' futile efforts, the Lord of the Dead advised against brute force, recognizing the futility of such attempts. Before he could continue, the sound of the chain holding the shackles interrupted him, preventing further discussion. Shock enveloped the Lord of the Dead as he realized the mercenary had broken the shackles through sheer physical strength, a feat incongruent with his claims of being a magician. Confounded, the mercenary reiterated his status as a magician rather than a brute force combatant. Exhaling, the mercenary inquired if this newfound revelation satisfied the Lord of the Dead's inquiry. He cautioned that it was premature, opting to wait for the opportune moment to breach the gate and make their escape. While acknowledging the merit of the mercenary's plan, the Lord of the Dead asserted his own readiness, refusing to remain trapped without a strategy. His approach involved patience, awaiting the unfolding of the warrior's plan. Thus, he advised his companion against expending energy unnecessarily, confident in the efficacy of his own proposed strategy. Just as he uttered these words, rocks began to cascade from the ceiling, prompting panic among the dungeon's guards who raised the alarm of an attack. Without turning to his neighbor, the Lord of the Dead noted that the anticipated moment had arrived. Guards scrambled towards the main entrance, alarmed by the unexpected breach. Confusion reigned as guards reported sighting only one individual amidst the chaos. The severity of the alarm contrasted with the solitary figure's presence, yet the guards remained vigilant. Their uncertainty persisted until an elderly man delivered several powerful blows to the castle's main wall. With each strike, the wall crumbled, prompting the warrior to demand an audience with the manager. Though incredulous at the ease with which the outer walls fell, the guards readied themselves for combat. Despite their disbelief, they stood prepared to defend their post to the end, drawing their swords. The man reassured them, expressing his desire for dialogue with their superior and critiquing their failure to promptly open the doors, leading him to breach the wall. Moments later, Firkin encountered an old acquaintance who jestingly remarked on the warrior's enduring stubbornness. Standing beside him were an elf and a dwarf, their gazes fixated on the warrior with palpable anger. The man acknowledged their settled presence before asserting the need to address their misunderstanding promptly. Before an agreement could be reached, the forest elder lunged at the warrior with his weapon. However, his attempt lacked finesse, his demeanor indifferent as he awaited the warrior's response and rationale. Miraculously, the warrior managed to block the blow at the last moment, averting potential disaster. Locking eyes with the chief elf, he questioned the propriety of attacking mid-conversation. The accusation followed, alleging the warrior's collusion with the ghostly king and his intent to sow chaos in their sacred forest, thereby precluding any dialogue. Recognizing the need for clarification, the man realized he had much to explain for the forest elder to comprehend. Placing a hand on the elder's shoulder, he emphasized the urgency of their discussion. He elucidated his need for the forest essence, akin to the phantom counts, to achieve a specific objective. The forest elder rebuffed his plea, citing the sanctity and importance of these artifacts to their people. Undeterred, the warrior reiterated the significance of his cause, asserting its precedence over the guardians' lives. His words elicited fervent protests from the subordinates, urging the forest elder to dispatch the intruder immediately. Understanding the gravity of the situation, the forest elder swung his weapon once more, aiming for the warrior's head. Yet the warrior swiftly intercepted the blow, seizing the elder and halting his advance. However, what struck as odd was the sudden demise of several guards positioned near the forest elder. The elder inquired about the nature of these events, questioning if they were some form of trickery. Yet Firkin, displaying strength, denied any involvement, as a voice emerged from the mist unexpectedly. Sir Oren emerged from the fog, informing the warrior of urgent matters that required attention. Hearing this, the warrior was somewhat taken aback and inquired about the urgency and whether it could be postponed. Additionally, he inquired if Sir Oren arrived alone, to which the latter, with a persistent smile, assured he wouldn't dare venture alone, emphasizing the need for his retinue's presence. Recognizing the necessity for respect, he promptly arrived with his entire retinue. As the First Order of Knighthood intervened, the forest elder perceived a desire from the human king to resolve the situation. A cunning plan dawned on the warrior, prompting him to approach the forest elder once more regarding the essence, this time proposing a deal. The proposition was simple: relinquish the essence, and in return, the warrior would handle the matter with the little people. The dynamics shifted as the general engaged in strategic maneuvers with a close associate. Despite consistent victories, it was evident that compliance played a significant role. The associate remarked that the conflict with the Elven faction seemed to unveil latent abilities within the general. In response, the general downplayed it, attributing any newfound prowess to the prolonged duration of the war nearing its conclusion. Surprised by the spread of rumors, The general reacted mildly to the news of the First Order of Knighthood's involvement. Regardless, it was apparent that the absence of action from the First Order would prove advantageous. A comrade questioned why the general was casually lounging in the camp instead of mobilizing all troops to swiftly resolve the matter. He opted to clarify, mentioning that his comrade seemed to struggle with identifying the subject. This pertained to the inaugural knighthood, a chivalric order directly under the emperor's command. Proficient in both swordsmanship and sorcery, each member boasted strength equivalent to 1,000 warriors. The general persisted in sharing despite his comrade's assertion of awareness. The members of this elite unit operated clandestinely, shrouded in mystery. Thus, the general and his troops could only await and enjoy their respite, for their intervention promised heightened intrigue. Specifically, the war's outcome had become as predictable as dry kindling succumbing to flames. Meanwhile, the skirmish ensued, initiated by the druid's transformation into a bear and launching an assault on the foremost adversary. This adversary, a member of the order, remained steadfast for a time. At the 11th hour, he deftly positioned his shield to deflect the bear's strike. The blow landed nonetheless, fracturing several of the opponent's delicate bones. Sensing the urgency, the elf swiftly drew her bow, commanding her comrades to assail in unison. Despite their concerted effort, one member of the order deployed a defensive barrier, thwarting both projectiles and foes alike. He sustained the shield's energy relentlessly, denying adversaries any opportunity for advancement. Eventually, the elf expressed exasperation at the ceaseless resilience of their foe, teetering on the brink of frustration. As the shield dissipated, it became evident that the Order's mages were concocting a formidable spell, yet it appeared their leader also possessed a hidden advantage, poised to unleash it at any moment. Specifically, the Forest Elder invoked the ancient call of the elusive tree, unseen in this world for an age. Stepping forth, a member of the Order resolved to confront this challenge alone. Her swordplay was fluid and precise, her gaze unwavering despite her opponent's towering stature. Meanwhile, conversing with the warrior, it became clear he hadn't anticipated such formidable resistance. He pondered the sudden intervention of the Fur King. Turning his attention back to the fray, he expressed urgency in resolving the escalating conflicts. He also found it curious how Oin had suddenly adopted a friendly demeanor, despite being strangers. Introducing himself as the deputy commander of the Premier Knighthood Order, he emphasized his mandate from the Emperor to enlist a warrior's aid. He disclosed his official position and mission, seeking an escort to meet with His Majesty. The warrior's demeanor shifted, revealing a past affiliation with light and an adamant refusal to be accompanied by just anyone. Despite his rising frustration, he restrained himself, mindful that negotiations had yet to commence. Before he could protest further, the Forest Elder interjected, insisting that Firkins's strength was needed. However, Firkins expressed interest solely in the essence of the conflict. Embracing the unexpected challenge, he welcomed the opportunity to face such a formidable opponent, accepting the confrontation without hesitation. Simultaneously, a gust of air stirred beneath the warrior's feet as he propelled himself fiercely into the attack. His sword sliced through the air, narrowly missing the warrior's beard by a hair's breadth. The force of the blow felled trees behind the adversary. Swiftly, the enemy retaliated, his sword slashing toward the legendary warrior with ferocious speed. In that moment, he sought to gauge the strength of his formidable opponent, recognizing few warriors equal to him. The ensuing strike left a shallow cut on the man's face, drawing forth beads of blood. Seizing his opponent's hand, the warrior prepared to impart a revelation. He acknowledged the quality of the opponent's blade, expressing curiosity about its origin. Falcon, undeterred, maintained his grip effortlessly, offering to satisfy his curiosity. It transpired that the sword could be summoned at will, as a second one materialized in his hand. He promised to reveal its source if defeated. Another horizontal strike forced Falcon to retreat momentarily, needing time to recover his strength. The warrior raised his head, realizing the enemy's attacks possessed a penetrative quality. Furthermore, The adversary began to channel energy into his swords, preparing for another assault. Now armed with 2 swords, he warned his opponent loudly to prepare for what was to come. In an instant, torrents of energy surged toward him at incredible velocity. The impact was so vast that the warrior had no choice but to brace for it. It was evident from his demeanor that containing it was no easy task. As the torrent of energy ceased, he realized his limbs were searing with intense pain, causing considerable discomfort. Adding to his predicament, an adversary closed in wielding 2 swords, proclaiming an end to the games. Yet, at the critical moment, the blow failed to connect for an unforeseen reason. The agile falcon sidestepped in less than half a second, evading notice. Though his countenance had been grim and serious moments ago, it now bore a renewed smile. He remarked that the intensity of the search was akin to a lethal aura, expressing genuine admiration. A notion struck him, prompting him to urge his adversary to cease delaying and engage seriously. As Falcon retreated slightly, he sensed an obstacle behind him, the ancient forest elder facing away. Observing his old friend's exhausted state and labored breathing, Falcon felt a pang of concern. Yuta lamented that each of these warriors was a formidable adversary, equally matched in strength. Recalling his recent bout, Falcon particularly remembered the formidable opponent he had faced. A young woman, she displayed power reminiscent of the mighty warriors of her youth. Falcon couldn't believe what he heard, but the forest elder affirmed earnestly that his assessment wasn't influenced by her victory over him. This stirred memories for Falcon, recalling their past camaraderie when they fought side by side. Yoda noted this as a time when Falcon retained his former self. After a brief pause, the man remarked that while he had changed considerably, his core sensibilities remained intact. The elder found solace in this acknowledgement, interpreting it as a sign that his old friend might lend his aid once again. On, growing impatient, interjected, urging them to cease their banter and swiftly resolve their differences. Addressing the other warrior, Falcon expressed a growing urge to retaliate physically. Another pause ensued, during which the forest elder declared Falcon the victor, signaling his willingness to impart the essence. He encouraged Falcon to strike without hesitation, confident in his resilience. Despite the enemy's poised readiness, Falcon departed, assured of his abilities. The enemy reacted swiftly, blocking Falcon's blow with armored arm. In a calm tone, Falcon warned that resisting his force was futile, as continual defiance would eventually yield. Meanwhile, action unfolded elsewhere, where the captain of the Premier Knighthood Commando engaged in dialogue. Recounting information received from a farmer, Commando discussed a blonde-haired old man who traversed the Phantom King's lair unscathed. They deliberated on his journey to the Elven Forest, considering his possession of a magical sword. Prior events indicated his trajectory toward the Lost Citadels, prompting their attention toward the Elven Forest. Commando expressed satisfaction at finally targeting the warrior's objective, though the farmer wielding a sword struck him as peculiar. His subordinate explained that this anomaly prompted their intervention. He assured his subordinate that facing Falcon would elevate the challenge to a level beyond any previous encounters. Despite gratitude for the reassurance, Commando remained unworried, dismissing their adversary as a decrepit old man intoxicated by past weakness. Fearlessness defined the vice commander's strength, yet vanity hindered his progress. Turning to the commander, the team inquired why Falcon was deemed a warrior, not solely for wielding a holy sword. The answer was straightforward. Falcon earned the title for his sheer strength. Just as Falcon approached his opponent from behind, the adversary sensed his presence. It perturbed him greatly that such a formidable foe treated him akin to a mere nuisance. Despite enduring a near-overwhelming blow, Falcon retained enough strength to unleash several more. Forced onto one knee, the adversary blocked each blow amidst excruciating joint pain. The extent of Falcon's power seemed unfathomable, highlighting a grave underestimation. As he pondered this, Falcon poised his fist, aiming to incapacitate the deputy commander in a single strike. Falcon reneged on his earlier promise of a single blow, signaling a prolonged altercation. Despite the forceful attempt, The stout Firkins deftly avoided his counterattack and retaliated simultaneously, implying that such an outcome wouldn't be considered honorable. Midway through the punch's trajectory towards his head, the warrior suddenly discerned a blade hurtling toward him at alarming speed. Swiftly maneuvering his body to evade, he executed the move with remarkable agility. To his surprise, it was one of the aides to the deputy commander of the foremost knightly order, obstructing his path. Dismissing the interruption, he pressed on with his assault, while the robust Firkins urged unity upon his adversary. The warrior, not out of concern for himself but to level the playing field, suggested solidarity among opponents. Until that moment, he had endeavored to elicit seriousness from his foe, to no avail. Once more he channeled his strength into his bare hands, remarking on the scarcity of affection for the overly solemn. Despite his efforts, his adversary swiftly evaded, inflicting several grievous wounds. In an instant, Firkin recalled the searing pain of being stabbed, rendering him temporarily immobile. Poised to deliver a decisive blow, he declared the stout Firkin a relic of the past. Now positioned behind his opponent, he swung with great force, aiming for a vertical strike. Yet, to his surprise, his hand grasped nothing. The sword meant to cleave one warrior into two was absent. Unyielding, Firkin stood firm, having thwarted the attack by seizing the blade with his bare hands. Turning his head, he admonished the notion of labeling one a relic of the past, emphasizing the need to start anew. The near disappearance of his expression signaled the shock as his assault was effortlessly halted by the bare hand of his adversary. Dismissing his opponent, the man critiqued not the sword itself but its wielder's lack of finesse. The discerning eye could appreciate the meticulous craftsmanship evident in the accelerated forging process, yielding swords of unparalleled quality. It appears that the monarch persists in the endeavor to forge a new sacred blade, a testament to the ongoing pursuit of excellence in weaponry. A second attempt at a rear assault was swiftly thwarted by the vigilant Firkin, who, without even glancing, intercepted the strike with his newfound weapon. Slowly turning his gaze, the sword now poised at the throat of the deputy commander of the primary knightly order left him at a loss for a countermove. The sudden appearance of another blade, poised menacingly at Firkin's neck, added an unexpected twist to the confrontation. It transpired that an additional ally of the knightly order had stealthily approached, positioning himself as a new player in the unfolding drama. Firkin's attention shifted towards the fresh adversary, acknowledging the intrusion into what had been a one-on-one duel. The revelation elicited a chuckle from one present, indicating a recognition of the warrior's true identity. It became evident that the force exerted in Firkin's sword swing had reverberated, impacting the castle's defensive barrier utilized by the elves. The elder of the forest, amidst the ongoing battle, queried the warrior regarding his intentions for the substantial breach in the castle wall. Initially, aiming for a singular strike, Firkin's frustration bubbled forth as he asserted the structural damage resulted from the sheer force of his blows, prompting a call for reconstruction. In the face of this realization, the imperative for fortification and the intricacies of combat strategy intertwine, highlighting the evolving dynamics of warfare and the imperative of adaptability in the face of unforeseen consequences. Having believed he had a thorough grasp of his opponent's psyche, he found himself perplexed by the latter's unwavering composure. This newfound calmness irritated him greatly, prompting him to even lower his sword, yet strong Firkin maintained his poised position near the throat. He turned to the mage of the knightly order named Stepa, instructing him to initiate a retreat. The prospect of their departure without resolution dismayed him, prompting a sense of frustration. Despite the circumstances, he couldn't help but marvel at encountering such an elusive adversary, suggesting a level of skill surpassing even that of the captain. Acknowledging the honor of the encounter, he emphasized the necessity of resolving the situation before departure, deferring to Firkin for clarification. At that moment, a portal materialized above the deputy commander's head, indicating their preparedness for a mass teleportation spell. Furthermore, he hinted at a diversionary tactic about to unfold. While Firkin remained puzzled, it seemed the deputy commander alluded to a formidable and monstrous projectile. Anticipating the futility of stalling tactics, the warrior resolved not to release the hostages. However, as the projectile hurtled towards him, he realized escape might not be as simple as he had hoped. The sheer energy of the arrow threatened to overwhelm him, yet the sword he wielded managed to withstand the impact. Following the dissipation of the initial arrow's energy, several smaller arrows emerged in the sky, emitting a substantial amount of energy. In that moment, the members of the knightly order seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving behind an air of mystery and uncertainty. When the warrior exclaimed about a single shot, Horn retorted that indeed there was only one, which somehow seemed dishonorable. The gravest moment arrived when the bear teetered on the brink of death, a knightly order member swinging an axe toward him. Yet fortune favored the bear, as his assailant vanished at the last moment, sparing his life. Similarly, the elf, facing overwhelming odds, found herself incredulous at her sudden deliverance. Swift to adapt, she proclaimed their victory amidst the chaos. The scene shifted to a nearby mountain where an archer of the knightly order stood guard. Reflecting on the vice captain's unexpected decision, the archer admitted to never considering the possibility of defeat. In response, he likened the battle to the discovery of a new realm, feeling small in its enormity. The First Knightly Order now comprehended the strength of their opponent and the magnitude of effort required for victory. Despite employing all their tactics and resources, victory remained elusive, leading to a sobering realization of defeat. The mission to accompany the warrior ended in failure for the First Knightly Order. The battleground resembled a desolate wasteland scorched by the intensity of the conflict. The warrior scanned the skies for lingering threats, ensuring no further arrows descended. Approaching him, the forest elder inquired about his friend's well-being, prompting the warrior to assure him of his safety and the need to address pending matters. Yuta reassured him of his trustworthiness, but posed one final question in exchange for his cooperation. Specifically, he pondered why Firkin the Strong still sought the essence of the forest. Long ago, the scene unfolded in a secluded basement known to few. Within this clandestine space, Strong Firkins conversed with an individual regarding the stranger's interest in delving deeper into the mysteries of the Lich. The stranger clarified that his fascination lay in understanding the intricacies of the process itself. Firkin recognized this trait in himself, an insatiable curiosity that drove him relentlessly until he reached the depths of any pursuit. This drive led him to forge the Holy Sword, eventually coming into Firkin's possession. Despite its sanctified title, the sword was, in essence, a potent magical artifact, capable of consuming its owner's body and spirit. Aware of its dangers, the warrior reserved its use for dire circumstances, typically carrying it within a magical bag on his belt. Bendel warned of the sword's insidious influence, foreseeing dire consequences for its owner. Unfazed, the warrior asserted his resilience as Firkin the Strong, confident that no sword could overpower him due to his mana saturation. However, Bendel cautioned that this mana oversaturation could lead to a catastrophic outcome, potentially causing his body to rupture or his mind to succumb to darkness. To counteract these risks, Bendel proposed the application of the essence of the Lich, which could mitigate physical deficiencies. Through the use of blood magic and nerve manipulation, wounds could be controlled and made non-fatal. Firkins expressed astonishment at this revelation, prompting him to inquire how Bendel came by such knowledge. He recounted conducting experiments with the Ghost King, recalling it as one of the few times the Phantom King desired death. The warrior realized why the Phantom King had once instructed him to bring the Ghost King alive. After a brief pause, Firkin inquired how long Bendel intended to maintain his current guise. Bendel confessed to only just recollecting his previous identity, admitting to a penchant for concealing his true self from others. Transformed into a younger, more appealing form, he found solace in his disguise. The scene shifted to the present, specifically to the Tree of Madness, where repair efforts were underway, with everyone pitching in. Laughter echoed from the forest elder's office, followed by a slightly subdued chuckle from Firkin. Upon their subsiding laughter, the elder expressed disbelief at Firkin's intention to resurrect Bendel, then turn him into a lich. Their shared amusement contrasted with the bafflement of others at the table. Amidst the mirth, the forest elder revealed his skepticism regarding Firkin's focus on creating rather than destroying witches, particularly in light of the request for the essence of the forest as a sacrifice. The forest elder affirmed the importance of honoring agreements, hearkening back to the ancient traditions of the elves. Perturbed by the discussion's direction, the forest elder's daughter, also an elf, questioned her father's indulgence in what she deemed nonsensical discourse. She voiced her discontent with Firkin's deviation from discussing the destruction of witches to their potential creation, particularly given the request for the essence of the forest as a sacrifice. Her father defended their commitment to honor agreements, rooted in the ancient elf customs. Yet he remained intrigued by Firkin's sudden desire to resurrect Bendel after 3 decades. Bendel had perished in the battle against the Demon King, now resting in peace within the Black Earth. Hence, the reason behind Firkin's intent to disturb him needed clarification. Firkin insisted on refraining from meddling in personal affairs, advocating instead for each party to fulfill its obligations. Disagreeing, the forest elder asserted his right to understand the warrior's true motives. He speculated that the entire endeavor revolved around the retrieval of the Holy Sword. Several elves at the table echoed rumors of the Holy Sword's loss. Yuta expressed disappointment, realizing the truth upon observing Firkin's reaction. Learning that the warrior remained fixated on the sword saddened him. Firkin interrupted the silence, admitting the forest elder's insight, confirming his quest for the Holy Sword. Despite searching various locations, including the Grey Mountain Dragon's Nest and the Elf King's Garden, the sword remained elusive. Not even Grigor's underground tomb yielded results. Frustration boiled over as memories flooded his mind, culminating in a forceful strike upon the table. He confessed to once deeming the task impossible, having exhausted all avenues. The forest elder, amidst the shattered table, lamented the loss of valuable furniture. Firm in his resolve, Firkin reiterated his determination to locate the Holy Sword, willing to go to any lengths. Yuta admonished him, perceiving his obsession with the sword as bordering on madness. Firkin asserted his sanity, urging the elder to uphold his promise. Recognizing the urgency of their mission, the elder acquiesced, agreeing to accompany the warrior. They ventured through the dim corridors of the towering trees, with the warrior's memory of the path scant. The labyrinthine passages seemed eerily similar, making it challenging to discern their route. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to a dungeon where the Lord of the Dead's shackles had just been removed. Gleeful at the turn of events, he expressed satisfaction that everything unfolded according to plan. Approaching one of the cages, the elf glanced at the prisoner within and explained that the Lord's release was part of a pact with the warrior, though it didn't extend to the captive. Despite the option to keep the prisoner incarcerated, releasing him seemed inconsequential as he could likely free himself effortlessly. With the mercenary departing the cage, confusion ensued among the guards, one realizing his missing handcuffs. As they prepared to depart, the guards protested, reminding the Lord of his status as their prisoner. Undeterred, the Lord of the Dead summoned purple energy, asserting his authority. Sensing the impending confrontation, the elf also tapped into his own energy reserves. Recognizing the futility of resistance, the elf released his energy as well. The Lord of the Dead, now relaxed, urged the guards to remain calm. Yet, in a sudden turn, he knelt and directed his energy towards the dungeon floor. A radiant purple light enveloped everything in its glow, followed by the Lord's promise of a small yet delightful gift for the guard. The guard's screams echoed as confusion overtook him, unable to grasp the impending actions of the Lord. The nearby mercenary swiftly comprehended the unfolding events, choosing not to intervene, being one of the Dark Lord's 4 commanders. He refused to blink, eager not to miss a moment of witnessing such profound magic, a rarity in his daily life. Strolling through the corridor, the warrior and his aged companion marveled at the hidden expanse within the tree, with Firkins expressing astonishment at its concealment. In response, his companion explained that it was to shield the forest's essence from prying eyes like the warrior's own. After navigating several more turns, the forest elder announced their arrival. Before them lay the body of the first man, known as the Wooden Giant, prompting the warrior to speculate that the core he sought might lie within. He pondered aloud, suggesting that the essence he sought might indeed reside within the fallen giant. With uncertainty, the forest elder suggested that perhaps the forest's essence indeed rested within. Seeking validation, the warrior glanced at his friend, hoping for a hint of jest in her expression, only to find her absent. The scene shifted once more to troops digging a deep hole, laying their fallen comrades to rest within it. Joining them, a priest recited prayers for the departed, entreating God to safeguard their souls. Disgruntled soldiers, burdened with carrying their friends' corpses, resented the priest's mere recitation of prayers, feeling they bore the brunt of the grim task. Disillusioned, one soldier scoffed at the priest's prayers, asserting their futility in resurrecting the dead, who were now permanently departed. Astonishment swept over all as the lifeless bodies stirred, their movements akin to those of an inebriated person. The priest reached out to one of them, inquiring about his well-being and offering his hand in assistance. However, upon drawing near, the reanimated corpse promptly attacked, sinking its teeth into the priest's flesh before rising to inflict further harm. Their numbers swelled, overwhelming the soldiers as they struggled to maintain composure. Meanwhile, the general sought respite in sleep at his camp, yet the incessant clamor thwarted his efforts. Desiring just 5 minutes of silence to drift off, he found himself denied such luxury amidst the persistent noise. Startled awake, he found a soldier before him who had already attempted to maim him. Chaos erupted in the camp as the soldiers screamed and fled, confronted by the reanimated dead. Managing to dispatch one assailant, the general emerged from his tent in search of the commander. However, the camp lay deserted, devoid of guards or any semblance of his army. His surroundings illuminated by a raging inferno with corpses littering the ground. Puzzled, he scanned for the whereabouts of the special unit tasked with his protection. Suddenly, a spectral figure of death materialized before him. Utterly confounded, the general was at a loss for words as the apparition proclaimed that all unfolding events were orchestrated by the Phantom King's will. Upon hearing this revelation, the general discarded any reliance on external safeguards, asserting his capability to make decisive choices, feeling underestimated. His demeanor shifted, exuding confidence as he emphasized the prestigious nature of commanding the Western Front. With a brilliant gleam, his eye emitted a surge of energy, instantly fortifying him. The Lord of the Dead, observing with amusement, chuckled as he realized a captivating entity was emerging from his magical snare. Soon, it became apparent that a head was rising from beneath the earth, almost fully liberated from its subterranean confines. The elf and the mercenary, though repulsed, applauded the spectacle for its macabre yet mystical nature. The Lord of the Dead clarified that the head had not merely surfaced, but had been severed from the enemy army's commander and relocated to the basement. In silence, they observed the elf's incredulous expression, prompting the Lord to inquire if he recognized the visage. Without hesitation, the elf identified the head as belonging to the enemy commander, distinguished by his magical right eye necessitating a prosthetic. Holding the freshly severed head, the elf realized the bald figure with artificial eyes was unmistakably his foe. The perplexity of this occurrence led the Lord of the Dead to explain it as a result of intricate spellcraft, combining powerful incantations with dark magic. Turning to the elf, the Lord asserted his dominion over the deceased, affirming that where there were corpses, his control prevailed. The guard comprehended the dreadfulness of this sorcerer, recognizing the swift conclusion of the war, a feat the Supreme Elder had failed to achieve in 3 years, now resolved in an instant. As they prepared to depart, one of them remarked that the price for freedom seemed adequate. The guard concurred, and they began their journey. However, their progress was halted by the sudden appearance of Firkins, who intervened forcefully. Firkins, long absent, addressed the Lord of the Dead with titles both scornful and mocking. Despite protests from the Phantom King, Firkins persisted in his belittling, attributing his demotion to weakness. Sensing the futility of argument, the Lord inquired about the fulfillment of their agreement and the acquisition of the forest essence. Assured that it was in his possession, Vladimir, taken aback, requested to see it. As Firkins turned, a massive thug loomed behind him, too large for the basement. The Lord, perplexed, asked the warrior about this imposing figure. The warrior revealed it to be the essence of the forest itself. Firkins, with wild eyes, had sought the forest elder's wisdom, leading to this revelation. Advised to listen, Firkins recounted the creation of the forest essence from the fallen giant's remains. The forest giant's demise had scattered his body across the world, from which the essence emerged. Disinterested in history, the warrior insisted on immediate possession of the essence. The elf urged Firkins to approach, emphasizing the importance of understanding the essence's origins. At the altar, the forest elder confessed their ignorance regarding the essence of the forest's appearance and nature, emphasizing their role as mere guardians. Throughout history, numerous attempts were made to seize the essence for selfish ends, yet all met with failure. Despite earlier assurances to the warrior, the elder admitted their inability to relinquish the item due to their lack of knowledge. With the backstory clarified, the elder instructed Firkins to bring his head closer to the water source. As Firkins complied, he warned the elf that any mention of the essence residing in his heart would not be taken lightly. Ignoring the threat, the elder abruptly kicked the warrior, sending him tumbling into the altar. Amidst the chaos, the elf proclaimed the water as the source of all answers. From that moment on, the warrior's fate hung on his response to the new circumstances. Furious, Firkins cursed and raged upon rising from the altar. Orienting himself, Firkins realized he had entered a vastly different realm. It appeared to be another dimension, with everything starkly different from his previous reality. Despite the unfamiliarity, the surroundings seemed strangely appealing, save for one glaring exception. Initially captivated by the beauty of a white tree, Firkins watched in dismay as it vanished like a fleeting illusion. Moments later, the tree reappeared, confounding the powerful warrior once more. With a renewed sense of wonder and uncertainty, Firkins beheld the tree as it materialized once again. Before him stood a towering giant, dwarfing hundreds of warriors in stature. Firkins realized with a jolt that this giant was none other than Jordan, the wooden giant, and this realm was his creation in another dimension. Unfazed by Firkins' presence, the giant regarded him momentarily, barely acknowledging his existence. With a casual gesture, he remarked on the emergence of mosquitoes due to decaying food. Delivering a sharp but controlled blow, the giant sent earth flying in all directions where Firkins stood. Curiously, it seemed something restrained the giant from striking with full force. Despite his efforts, Firkins struggled against the giant's hand. After a pause, the giant mistook Firkins for a stag. Exerting his strength, Firkins felt blood trickle from his nose under the pressure. Abruptly, the giant's palm vanished, leaving Firkins standing on solid ground. A voice nearby, devoid of accent, claimed unfamiliarity with the place. Approaching, the giant reassured Firkins of the misunderstanding. Assuming a more human-like form, the giant approached Firkins. Firkins, incensed by the near-death experience, confronted the giant about the consequences of such misunderstandings. The giant asserted his authority, stating that in this realm, no one perishes without his consent. As the warrior inspected his hands, the giant assured him that his body would fully recover in a matter of moments. In response, he faced the giant and remarked that such an action was unnecessary. Had another been in his stead, they might have ended up as mere firewood. Shifting aside, the giant conceded the truth in the stranger's words, acknowledging the overwhelming force he possessed. Curious, he inquired about the stranger's identity. Initially, Firkin intended to reveal himself as the warrior, yet he swiftly corrected it, claiming to be a passing elderly man. Simultaneously, beckoning two small thrones from beneath the ground, The giant expressed his surprise at such an unusual name as warrior for an elderly passerby. As the thrones emerged, the giant greeted him warmly, albeit apologizing for the belated salutations. The warrior confessed that warrior wasn't his actual name, though he found himself reluctant to correct the misunderstanding. Seated upon one of the thrones, Firkin speculated about the giant's true identity. He surmised him to be one of the earliest beings fashioned by the Creator. He elaborated, describing this figure as a divine entity, revered by mortals as a wooden deity, a giant among giants. Reflecting on the encounter, he pondered how he might have dressed more fittingly had he known he'd be in the presence of such a divine being. The giant clarified that despite mortal perceptions, he was not truly divine, but rather a being brought forth from memories long after his original existence ceased. Hearing this revelation, Firkin realized he need not bestow undue reverence upon the giant, as he was not truly divine. Accepting this, Firkin suggested they converse on a first-name basis before promptly requesting the essence of the forest. After deliberating for an extended period, the giant confessed he couldn't fulfill the request. Inquisitive, the warrior pressed for an explanation. The giant admitted to needing time to ponder, confessing his own ignorance regarding the essence of the forest. Reacting impulsively, the warrior leaped from his throne, questioning vehemently if the giant truly had no knowledge of the essence of the forest. Contemplating aloud, he wondered if the essence might embody life, energy, or some other immense force akin to a sprawling garden. He mused that if the essence were indeed a colossal force, the giant's ignorance might make some sense. Nevertheless, he reaffirmed his reluctance to relinquish such power to a mere passerby, whether named warrior or not. When the giant cited his lack of strength as the reason, the warrior mimicked the giant's earlier action, striking the ground with his hand. Dismissing the excuse, he argued that the giant had nearly crushed him moments ago with a single movement. Pondering this contradiction, the giant admitted to being a being devoid of inherent strength yet possessing boundless power. In an instant, he expanded in size, illustrating his ability to transform into anything or anyone. He elaborated on his paradoxical nature, capable of destruction and creation, yet constrained by his mere existence. Furthermore, he explained to the warrior that transferring such power was impossible. Undeterred, the warrior invoked the trope of fairy tales where gifts are often bestowed, insisting the giant must offer something. Responding to the challenge, the giant summoned an animal, presenting the warrior with the opportunity to receive an extraordinary gift in the form of a magnificent deer. However, the deer, startled, darted away as soon as it appeared, evading capture. The colossal figure reverted to its towering form and inquired if the man had any further words. Distraught over his failure to capture the forest essence, the warrior paused to collect his thoughts. Reality fell short of his expectations, leaving him uncertain of what he truly sought. Meanwhile, Yuan grasped the firkins and hinted that without further discourse, he would dispatch the warrior into the realm of combat, not as a mere passerby. Yet in a final plea, the warrior demanded the deer he was owed. In response, the deer materialized before the startled onlookers, but Yuan explained that granting extraordinary strength was beyond his capacity. Nevertheless, the warrior's insistence on possessing the deer remained unyielding. Though merely an ordinary deer, its appearance failed to fulfill the warrior's aspirations for incredible power and prowess. Subsequently, the warrior conveyed to the giant his newfound understanding, asserting that now the young man must grasp the same insight. Specifically, he emphasized that from this moment onward, the youth embodies the very essence of the forest. However, the giant countered, identifying himself as nothing more than a manifestation of yearning. Undeterred, the warrior argued that, in his perspective, the giant indeed epitomized the essence of the forest. Considering the giant's earlier assertion about appearances emerging from within, the divine creature's manifestation ought to accompany the warrior. Pondering this, the giant remarked on the amusing nature of mortals, noting that many had traversed through, yet the warrior was the first to seek to take him. Without much persuasion, the giant agreed to follow the warrior's lead, acknowledging that it was the desire of not just the warrior, but also the elderly passerby. Transitioning, the focus shifted to the Lord of the Dead, who affirmed his earlier expectation that the essence of the forest transcended mere mundane force. He observed the towering figure from every angle, feeling a distant longing for the presence of divinity. The manifestation of divine consciousness was a sight to behold. Conversely, the colossal being beheld before him a creature who had shattered the curse and attained immortality, a fact of considerable intrigue. These exchanges between two immensely powerful entities left the weary mercenary with little option but to remain silent. The forest elder found it quite fascinating to witness these events unfold, pondering how long they would endure their clash of wills. Additionally, the forest elder was intrigued by the resilience displayed by both parties, wondering how long they would maintain their resolve. Who dared to approach him? Notably absent was the warrior's presence. Yet the forest elder turned his gaze towards the unseen figure. The forest elder, noting the disheveled state of the newcomer, felt a twinge of sympathy and promptly instructed him to tidy up and change attire as he prepared to depart. Yura was haunted by the notion that after years of striving to win the war, it concluded so swiftly in a single day. The warrior who razed the fortress and the detested black mage ultimately became their saviors. However, the cessation of hostilities signaled not the end of the war, but rather a brief respite. They realized that if another army amassed and launched an assault, they would be unable to defend themselves. The bear voiced their intent to rally an army, but the forest elder interjected, declaring such efforts futile. Upon a contemplative glance at their belongings, the elder, after a brief pause, informed Garm that they would depart from the forest. This announcement left the bear thoroughly astonished. Elder Yuta explained that their duty was to safeguard the essence of the forest. Simultaneously, their mission was to protect all guardians of the forest. Throughout the 3 years of conflict, they had endured countless losses of kin, comrades, and soldiers, a fate the forest elder vowed not to repeat. Furthermore, when the forest's essence wandered freely without consultation, it left them no alternative. After some consideration, the bear acknowledged his allegiance to the Supreme Elder's decision. Subsequently, he instructed the bear to gather all the elders, signaling that the time had come to determine their collective fate. The scene shifted, now focusing on the gathering place of the strong comrades where all the actions unfolded. As he strode along, he idly touched his newly grown beard, noticeably shorter than before. Adorned in new attire and footwear, he addressed 3 comrades, noting their diverse roles within the team. With everyone assembled, he urged them to embark on their next journey. Their progress was abruptly halted by the sudden appearance of an elf. The elf conveyed the Supreme Elder's directive to exchange garments and express gratitude for their assistance in ensuring safe passage. Grappling with the improbability of the situation, the warrior expressed doubt. Unfazed, the elf vowed to strengthen herself to avoid future reliance on their aid. She cryptically hinted at a future reckoning, promising to repay her perceived debt. Furkan, displaying his characteristic stoicism, distanced himself, uninterested in sentimentality. Despite the elf's confusion, he affirmed his readiness to face any challenge. With the exchange completed, they resumed their journey, venturing forth into the unknown. Against the backdrop of war, they confronted a formidable human army poised for battle. Renowned for their prowess in direct combat despite their limited intellect, the orcs posed a formidable threat on the battlefield. Their deafening cries and unorthodox formations instilled fear even in the bravest of foes. Urging immediate aggression, one orc near the commander advocated for a swift and total annihilation of the enemy. However, the orc commander interjected, invoking the wrath of their deity and advising patience. Assembled for the sole purpose of waging war against humanity, they braced for the impending conflict. Brandishing his sword, the commander declared the onset of a decisive clash, promising fresh bloodshed. Unaware of his adversary's identity, the commander, identifying himself as Fearless Grog of the Shieldstone tribe, demanded to know his opponent. A soldier sounded a signal on a special wind instrument, prompting some troops to kneel in deference. As the emperor passed by, resolute and unwavering, the atmosphere grew tense. Undeterred, the emperor proclaimed himself as the foe against whom the orcs would contend. Fearless Grog's cries intensified, his thirst for human blood apparent. Warrior James, positioned beside the emperor, handed him a spear amid the cacophony of orcish fervor. With all eyes fixed on the unfolding confrontation, the emperor accepted the spear, poised for battle. With a confident flourish, the emperor hinted at the prospect of an engaging duel. The orc watched helplessly as the spear hurtled toward him with alarming velocity. The spear's velocity made it nearly impossible to track, passing the orc in a mere blink of an eye. Its momentum proved devastating, piercing multiple orcs behind the commander with lethal precision. Acknowledging the human's formidable strength, the commander vowed vengeance with his dying breath. As the emperor closed in, even the stalwart leader of the Shieldstone tribe quivered, dwarfed by the emperor's imposing stature. Towering over fearless Grog, the emperor asserted his dominance, proclaiming the orc's imminent demise. Seeking aid from his fiercest ally, fearless Grog turned to the angry dog, only to find it gone without a trace. With resolve, the emperor seized the initiative, preparing to deliver the final blow. In one swift stroke, he ended fearless Grog's reign, cleaving his head from his shoulders. With the enemy commander vanquished, the emperor cleansed his sword with a cloth, marking his victory. His followers rallied around him, executing his command to eliminate every last foe in his name. Amidst fervent cries for total annihilation, the soldiers surged forward, intent on eradicating all opposition. In the aftermath of the battle, a close aide congratulated the emperor on his triumph. Yet, news arrived simultaneously of the demise of the Western Front's commander. Further complicating matters, an army of 5,000 soldiers fell victim to the reanimated dead. Determined to quash the threat, the emperor tasked his subordinate with marshaling 10,000 soldiers to obliterate the forest stronghold. The emperor was taken aback when he came across the name of an old acquaintance in the report, Firkin Strong. His subordinate elaborated, revealing that Sir Sargon, who had been trailing Firkins in the war, had finally encountered him in the forest, albeit unsuccessfully. Pondering over the failed mission, the emperor remarked on Firkin's evident prowess honed over 3 decades. Instructing his subordinate to relay a message to Buchan and await further orders, the emperor prepared for imminent danger. Seizing another spear, he braced himself as a threat loomed on the horizon. An orc mounted on a dragon approached, vowing vengeance for fearless Grog. With calm determination, the emperor poised his spear, ready to confront the incoming adversary. Expressing hope that the warrior still possessed the necessary artifact, the emperor readied himself for the confrontation. Stepping onto the dragon's lifeless head, he reflected on the consequences of blind obedience to the orc's commands. Victorious once again, the emperor had vanquished 2 formidable foes with just 2 decisive actions. Meanwhile, a small group traversed the forest, prompting the warrior to explain that he had entrusted his bag to a friend. The Ghost King expressed disbelief at the casual relinquishing of such a valuable item, to which the warrior explained his rationale. A mercenary accompanying the group inquired about the bag's contents and the emperor's interest in it. The hero revealed that the bag typically housed the King of Devils and a few other significant items, eliciting astonishment from the group. Despite the revelation, the warrior remained unfazed, mentioning the presence of Burl among the bag's contents. The mercenary questioned the warrior's assertion that he had captured the supposedly deceased Devil King in a sack. Turning to the assembled company, the warrior acknowledged their exclusive knowledge and congratulated them. Singling out the mercenary, he suggested that the latter was privy to too much information and cautioned against Firkin's entertaining thoughts of removing him. Identifying himself as the magician Adel, the mercenary explained his quest to find his mentor and expressed hope that the group might provide leads. Firkins, however, insisted there was no time to spare in the search for Adel's teacher, advocating an immediate return home. Learning the teacher's name as Koba Braid, the warrior pondered deeply. Koba Braid was renowned as a great sage, a figure evidently familiar to the formidable Firkin. Firkin had been a mentor to the young warrior for an extensive period. The warrior's tone grew more assertive as he stated that Koba Braid had long passed away. Disagreeing, the mercenary claimed Koba Braid had become the 13th Lich, a former sage. The Phantom King suggested Koba Braid might aid them in locating the Holy Sword and reviving his companion. Dismissing Koba Braid as a deceitful figure, the warrior implied that Firkin's perspective was unique. Emphasizing adherence to their plan, the hero focused on resurrecting Bendel and accomplishing secondary objectives. While acknowledging the possibility of encountering Koba Braid, the warrior advised the mercenary not to intervene. In highlighting their accomplishments, the warrior noted their acquisition of the forest essence and queried his assistant about what remained. He explained that the forest essence was a necessary offering to appease the departed soul. With the essence secured, their sole requirement now was a heart capable of restoring a deceased body. This crucial heart belonged to the individual the group had recently discussed. The essence contained a precious crystal, believed to possess boundless magical energy akin to the heart of the earth. Sensing its immense power, the creature harbored aspirations of wielding it to fulfill any desire, including resurrecting the Devil King. Despite the Phantom King's mention of prior attempts at the Devil King's resurrection, the warrior remained steadfast in his belief of its impossibility. Their focus shifted towards a nearby village nestled by a mountain. The village's focal point was its tavern, where occasional guests found lodging. Suddenly, in the dead of night, a hooded figure arrived, arousing the curiosity of the patrons. The mysterious arrival drew immediate attention from the men gathered for drinks. The hooded stranger proceeded directly to the bar, prompting the bartender's attention. Requesting the strongest drink available, the stranger engaged the bartender. His sole desire was a glass of their most potent libation. However, the tavern owner could only offer strawberry milk as their strongest option. The stranger's non-human teeth marked him as an unusual presence. As he sipped strawberry milk, two men approached him cordially, inquiring about his presence. They reassured him of their harmless intentions, urging him not to fear them. When met with silence, one man speculated about the stranger's potential deafness, while the other proposed communication through gestures. Expressing annoyance at the interruption of his respite by cockroaches, the stranger ominously hinted at retribution. In a swift and brutal act, the stranger fatally pierced one of the men with his bare hands. The sight left the second man paralyzed with fear, rendering him immobile. Overwhelmed by shock, he struggled to articulate anything beyond fragmented words. The hooded figure revealed himself to be a vampire disguised in inconspicuous attire. Within minutes, the settlement erupted in flames as the vampires unleashed chaos and revelry. They ruthlessly dispatched any who opposed them, leaving the village streets strewn with bodies. Though numerous, some vampires swiftly departed the scene. Despite enjoying the taste of strawberry milk, the tavern's vampire patron realized its consumption would no longer be feasible amidst the chaos. Approaching him, another vampire acknowledged him as kin. He declared their mission complete, intending to take some cockroaches back to their lair as sustenance. Amidst their dialogue, a sudden scream pierced the air, instantly seizing their attention. It appeared someone had attempted resistance, leading to a frenzy of activity as the mob struggled to subdue the individual. However, their situation took a dire turn when the man successfully seized the vampire by the neck. In a swift motion, the man snapped the vampire's neck with a sickening crunch audible from afar. The vampires, stunned like their tavern counterpart, found themselves immobilized by shock. Addressing the immobilized vampire, the stranger commanded him to remain still before darting away. With a brief pause, the warrior commanded the remaining vampires to flee before brandishing a fly swatter. Angered and bewildered, the vampires couldn't comprehend how an ordinary person had dispatched one of their own. Despite their rage, one vampire made a move to attack and feed on the man's blood. However, at the last moment, the forest essence materialized behind the formidable Firkin, halting the vampire in his tracks. Shocked and bewildered, the vampire found himself blindsided as a mercenary emerged, striking him with a blow from his staff. The strike rendered the vampire unconscious, leaving only one word on his lips. Enraged, the remaining vampire readied himself for battle, wings poised aggressively. Vowing not to let the matter rest, he threatened to report their defeat to their master. Swiftly, the warrior gestured for the vampire to depart, indicating their predetermined escape plan. With a command to the forest essence, the warrior labeled the vampire as a bad bird, prompting the essence to unleash a projectile towards the target. As the warrior surveyed the surroundings to discern the nature of the projectile, finding no nearby objects. Meanwhile, the fleeing vampire caught wind of a distinct whistle behind him, compelling him to turn and investigate. To his surprise, he encountered a mercenary hurtling towards him at supersonic speed, staff at the ready. The mid-air collision occurred at considerable altitude, leaving the warrior pondering the mercenary's landing strategy. While the forest essence moved to retrieve the thrown object, the warrior sought divine insight into the vampire's destructive rampage. He learned that vampires typically engage in such behavior while covertly dwelling among humans, rarely banding together except for vengeance against hunters. Cooperation among vampires also arises when summoned by their vampire lord for war. The forest essence intercepted the mercenary's descent, securing the improvised projectile. Continuing his conversation, the warrior's divine source revealed the vampire lord's role in uniting them. Inquiring about their relationship, the warrior discovered they operated under separate hierarchies, seldom crossing paths. Despite this, the vampire lord had summoned them all for an unknown purpose. Grateful residents whose lives the warrior had saved expressed their thanks. The warrior downplayed the gratitude, preferring answers to his inquiries instead. The man's attention faltered at the sight of what he presumed to be a descendant of the magic clan before him. However, the warrior intervened, asserting that this being was not merely a member of a magical lineage, but a deity in their presence. A deafening scream erupted from the man as disbelief washed over him at the realization of encountering a genuine magical deity. The warrior delivered a restrained blow, disapproving of the man's choice of words. Restating his intentions, the warrior expressed a desire to uncover the truth of the situation, promising the man's freedom upon divulging all he knew. The stranger reiterated his humble origins as a farmer, claiming no specialized knowledge. Recounting recent events, the man revealed the sudden appearance of vampires a month prior in the village of Two Hearts, situated beyond the mountain. Swiftly seizing control of sacred grounds, the vampires launched into a campaign of destruction, capturing both villagers and dwarves in their wake. The vampires seem to have established their stronghold in the mountain, evidenced by their territorial expansion mainly in its vicinity. Their prolonged occupation of the fortress hinted at ambitious schemes in the making. While acknowledging the warrior's keen awareness of global events, the Ghost King directed his curiosity towards the discrepancy of a skilled individual relegated to farming duties. The inhabitants of the stronghold were en route to the lava anvil, drawn by rumors of the heart of the Earth's presence there, as it had been the artifact's last known location. It appears that the vampires have set their sights on the same artifact. Acquiring it won't be a straightforward task. Despite the Phantom King's efforts to dissuade them, the warrior insisted on pressing forward, emphasizing the importance of not yielding their objectives to vampires. In a display of disdain, the Lord flung a glass directly at the vampire who approached him, a reaction fueled by his discontent over his soldier's demise at the hands of what he perceived as a mere commoner. This act stemmed from the Lord's displeasure at the loss of his soldiers, attributing their defeat to an ordinary individual. The vampire delivering the news sought forgiveness from his master, relaying reports from scouts who claimed first-hand sightings. Pondering the audacity of the individual who dared to slay his soldiers, the Lord recognized the newfound impossibility of their mission. Resolute in his belief that they could not allow the incident to pass unpunished, the Lord resolved that decisive action was necessary. Choices needed to be made, and the master's selection was unequivocal, commanding attention from all. With a solemn declaration, he beseeched the higher powers for intervention, acknowledging that his time had finally arrived. Labor at the lava anvil had intensified, with people enduring grueling tasks. The air was thick with the acrid scent of sweat mingled with the unmistakable tang of blood. Dwarves toiled under the weight of chains, their movements restricted as they relentlessly chipped away at the red stone. Fatigue quickly set in, yet any notion of respite was swiftly quashed by the relentless demands of their overseers. A sudden intervention saw a dwarf seized by the hair from behind, held in place by a vampire's grip. Reprimanded for attempting to rest, the dwarf was swiftly ordered back to work, the vampire brooking no dissent. In a defiant act, a fellow dwarf confronted the vampire, demanding an end to the mistreatment. United in their resolve, the dwarves refused to endure further oppression, prepared to confront their oppressors even at the cost of their lives. As tensions escalated, an unexpected figure intervened, positioning themselves between the vampire and the rebellious dwarves. To their surprise, it was Vlad, the true magister and lord of the vampires, who now stood before them. Realizing the futility of their resistance against the king of mosquitoes, the dwarves grappled with the daunting reality of their situation. The vampire relayed to his master that the dwarves were advocating for labor rights and demanding respite. In response, the overlord cited even the demon king's adherence to labor laws, decreeing an immediate granting of rest. At that moment, a sphere materialized on the table in the overlord's hand, composed entirely of blood. This blood-soaked sphere bore the essence of the dwarves closest to the ruler, their life force drained into its crimson depths. Struggling to articulate, the afflicted dwarves succumbed to their blood loss within moments. The surviving dwarves stared in disbelief at the lifeless bodies of their comrades, now pale and drained. Vlad plunged a finger into the sphere of dwarven blood, offering respite to those who desired it. Conversations buzzed as the dwarves dispersed, resigned to the inevitable resumption of their labor. Observing a fallen dwarf, a vampire inquired about their fate. It became apparent that the dwarf had been poisoned by potent magical energy. Despite their inherent resistance, the dwarf proved incapable of mining such magically charged stones. The vampire prepared to administer a fatal bite, recognizing the inevitability of the worker's demise. However, before the bite could be delivered, a stone struck the vampire's face, dislodging teeth in a sudden impact. The lord scrutinized his subordinate, who momentarily lost consciousness from the unexpected blow. The source of the stone's throw emerged as a dwarf, claiming the ability to cure the afflicted worker instantaneously. Despite the lord's reminder of unfinished tasks in the workshop, she swiftly approached the wounded man. As she neared the dwarf, she offered him a special elixir and mentioned her quest for the missing magic stones. After a moment of contemplation, the lord extracted a trickle of blood from the victim and remarked that the girl should be attending to her duties in the workshop. Astonished, the girl struggled to articulate her thoughts, momentarily rendered speechless by what she witnessed. However, it turned out to be an optical illusion. The vampire lord had only extracted a small amount of his own blood. As he started to depart, he declared his intent to overlook the transgression this time. Yet, he also issued a warning. He cautioned that compassion alone wouldn't save the dwarves. Rather, it was imperative to expedite the creation of the heart of the earth. Urging the girl to hasten, he indicated that his patience was wearing thin. With assistance provided to the victim, the girl rose to her feet and muttered under her breath, branding the lord of the vampires a brute. Meanwhile, she made her way toward a tower situated near the nearby mountains. There, the overlord inquired of a sentry about the whereabouts of a particular group. The sentry informed him that the group had commenced their journey across the mountains 2 days prior and was currently en route. This brought relief to Vladimir, as he anticipated rendezvousing with his subordinates soon, eager to gather information. They would soon discover the consequences of harming a vampire by touching them. Doran positioned himself near the mountain exit, awaiting the group's emergence. Expressing confusion at their delay, he wondered why they hadn't appeared yet. Suddenly, a rock slide occurred within the mountains, followed by a deafening explosion. It turned out to be the result of someone forcefully striking a pile of stones with their fist from within the mountain. This individual, a warrior, had managed to create an opening in the mountain with their bare hands, shouting to alert the group that he had found a way out. Despite the Phantom King's admonishment that roads aren't made by destroying walls, Firkin paid no heed. Subsequently, a dwarf emerged from the cave, appearing jubilant at newfound freedom. Observers noted that the dwarf's demeanor seemed more fearful than joyful. As a mercenary approached the group, she expressed disappointment at the necessity of freeing one of them. The warrior, intent on capturing everyone, questioned the seriousness of the situation. His response emphasized the importance of not missing opportunities for personal advancement. Despite the Phantom King's disapproval, the warrior insisted on the importance of seizing the moment and embracing life to the fullest. Tragically, during his sprint to freedom, he was struck by a spear and fell lifeless. Firkin the Strong imparted to the mercenary the value of luck, asserting its significance over mere effort. Ahead of the group stood armored troops mounted on combat boards ready for action. These young dwarves were clad in exceptional armor, reflecting their prowess and status. The warrior remarked to his companions that they seemed to have arrived at the right place, surprised by the formal reception. It appeared that these dwarves had a leader who, after retrieving his spear from the fallen dwarf, aimed it at the newcomers, demanding introductions. Uncertain of the stranger's intentions, they hesitated to determine whether they were foes or potential allies. Some speculated that the trio might be wandering bandits, judging by their appearance. When the mercenary claimed they were all wizards, the dwarves accused them of practicing dark magic. Their fear escalated upon seeing the monstrous figure among them. The commander swiftly ordered his subordinates to attack and eliminate the perceived threats. Despite the escalating tension, the warrior urged that physical violence wasn't the only solution, albeit the swiftest. One dwarf expressed disbelief, unable to comprehend the situation before him. He marveled at finally meeting the renowned Firkin, a symbol of strength. Recognizing his old friend, the warrior approached Firkin with warmth. They exchanged greetings, and Firkin jestingly remarked that his friend hadn't changed much, aside from perhaps shrinking a bit. In jest, his friend threatened to strike him with an axe if he made such comments again, to which the warrior retorted that at most it would reach his knee. Meanwhile, Mogul Doran observed silently, formulating a clear plan of action. After sharing a heartfelt conversation, a long unseen friend burst into hearty laughter. The warrior likewise relished in the exchange, dearly missing such interactions. Reflecting on his unchanged demeanor, he jokingly retrieved an axe from his boot. The dwarf jestingly mentioned his continued habit of eating rice with spoons. The commander approached his old friend, affectionately addressing him as "Come on, one." Hearing this nickname, the warrior erupted in protest, questioning the commander's audacity in using such a term for his subordinates. Acknowledging his friend's apparent laziness, the commander emphasized the importance of respecting him despite his unconventional military style. Formerly addressed as "Come on, one," the friend turned to the commander and introduced himself as a great warrior. Despite Firkin's reluctance to have his friend boast, the situation left him no choice. Observing his old friend, the warrior realized that perhaps this recognition was what he truly needed. Expressing regret for any offense caused, the commander clarified that the term held a different meaning, revealing that Mr. Rurik now served as a military advisor. Firkin turned to the dwarf in disbelief, questioning if he had truly retired. Mr. Rurik admitted to feeling the weight of age, no longer as youthful as he once believed. His admission about his back's condition hinted at the toll time had taken. The warrior reminisced about his former strength. Despite a hint of annoyance, Relic chose to overlook his emotions, inquiring about the purpose of the warrior's visit. Additionally, the dwarf was keen to learn about the monsters accompanying him. Upon closer inspection, it became apparent that among his companions stood the Phantom King. The warrior acknowledged that detailing the situation would be time-consuming, but he would attempt to provide a concise explanation, urging everyone to pay close attention. Leaning in, he whispered something into various ears, eliciting surprised reactions from the assembled group. Turning to his old friend, the dwarf sought confirmation regarding the discussed topic, receiving an honest affirmation. Tension subtly crept in as the dwarf tightened his grip on his axe, interrupting the previous calm atmosphere. Amidst laughter, he queried if the warrior truly intended to transform Bendel into a lich in pursuit of the holy sword. Abruptly, laughter ceased as the dwarf questioned Firkin's sanity, to which he attributed the harsh realities of the world. It was evident that the warrior's primary motive for his visit was to acquire the magic stone. The conversation took on a more serious tone as the warrior expressed his need for the heart of the earth, emphasizing the importance of its safekeeping. He assured that he was not reckless and sought to persuade the palace of his trustworthiness in safeguarding the artifact. However, the dwarf interjected, suggesting that the warrior could obtain the artifact if he could manage to acquire it somehow. Relic's remark hinted at the potential benefits if the warrior succeeded in resolving the issue. The looming problem was the presence of a vast number of mosquitoes near the artifact, a challenge the warrior was aware of. The dwarf informed the group that Vlad, a troublesome figure who emerged a month ago, had seized control of the fortress along with captive dwarves. Naturally, it's evident that a proficient flyer poses a unique challenge for gnomes. The warrior inquired of his comrade regarding the warriors hailing from the lava anvil. Varric responded that they weren't alone in their pursuit of the heart of the Earthstone, alongside the mosquitoes. Delving deep into the mountain range, they dedicated generations to mining in order to reach their objective. Eventually, they uncovered the heart, signaling the nearing completion of their labor. Little did they realize discovering the heart of the earth only compounded their troubles. News of the heart's discovery attracted various raiders, all vying to lay claim to the artifact. In their efforts to safeguard it, they depleted their resources, ultimately losing their primary stronghold. Retaking it wasn't straightforward. Vampires held hostages, and a hasty approach risked disastrous outcomes. Magic stones and assorted relics already posed significant challenges for the dwarf, prompting Rurik to delegate to Firkin the task of disposing of them. The warrior remained silent for a while, then found himself relieved to discover the task was more manageable than anticipated. Hence, he consented to his friend's proposal, agreeing to relinquish the head, heart, and even the stomach of the main mosquito. It seemed his friend hadn't fully grasped the consequences of haste, particularly the potential for harm to innocents. Despite this, the warrior believed it was imperative to act, recognizing that not everyone could be saved, and many suffered while others idled. As the stalwart Firkin departed, the dwarf sighed, reassured by his friend's expertise in combat. Before embarking on the mission, the dwarf withheld another piece of crucial information from his longtime friend. Upon mentioning the availability of such information, the stout warrior swiftly turned his gaze. We then realized that Vlad wasn't truly alone there, and the issue was far more significant than initially thought. Another formidable entity lurked nearby, capable of rivaling even the power of the vampire precursor. Meanwhile, inexplicably, the dwarven commander began to feel intensely unwell, foaming at the mouth. In mere moments, he lunged at the warrior with his spear, aiming for a fatal strike. Though filled with fear, Firkin the Strong reacted swiftly, halting the dwarf mid-air with a single blow. Despite the commander's sudden aggression, his motives remained unclear, leaving the warrior puzzled. As Firkin surveyed his surroundings, he noticed all the other dwarves were in a similar state to their commander. Their eyes glowed red, and a subtle violet energy pulsed from their bodies. It dawned on the warrior that the entire detachment had been affected by something, driving them to aggression. It became apparent to Firkin that they were all primed for battle, likely against a common foe. Rurik approached him, explaining that their condition was a result of the main enemy's arrival at the location. Casting a glance at the nearby mountain, the scale of the problem became dauntingly clear. Margoli Doran, the Cursor, would be the adversary of the dwarves under his command. Firkins, feeling confident, declared his intent to confront and defeat their opponent. However, Rurik's sudden shout halted his action. The warrior seemed to have forgotten the peril of looking at his adversary's helmet, which could instantly ensnare one's mind. Reminding the warrior of past occurrences, Rurik urged him to focus on his words to avoid succumbing to such influences again. Rurik proposed that if the warrior was prepared, he should step back, as Rurik intended to deliver the initial strike. When there was no immediate response from the dwarf, Rurik realized the situation was more dire than anticipated. Observing the expression on Firkin's face, it became apparent he too had fallen under Doran's control. The warrior swiftly fell into a trance, returning to a time of youth. Before him appeared 3 familiar faces he longed to see in reality. Among them was Bendel, the warrior's closest companion. Also present was a human king with whom they shared numerous memories, and Oral, standing prominently before him. The surreal nature of the situation made it difficult for him to believe everything was real and well. Realizing the illusion, Firkin quickly snapped out of the trance, understanding it was nothing more than a deceptive dream. The primary threat remained the dwarves, numerous and highly skilled in combat. Fortunately, one of the warrior's allies knew how to address this issue and swiftly approached one of them. As he performed this action, his eyes illuminated with a piercing blue hue, channeling his energy through his hands directly into the dwarf's skull. Subsequently, the same dwarf's eyes, previously ablaze with red intensity, rapidly dimmed. After a brief moment, he vehemently declared his refusal to be subjugated, and the pupils reappeared in his eyes. Following this, the woodland essence distanced itself slightly, allowing the gnome to regain consciousness. Similar interventions were required for several others, swiftly bringing them back to awareness, though their comprehension of the situation remained limited. Taking charge, one of them raised his spear and instructed the group to ready themselves for combat now that they had regained their senses. Despite a sizable contingent of dwarves still seething with rage and appearing almost frenzied, the essence approached them, conveying the urgency of a vital message. Specifically, the crux of the issue lay concealed, emphasizing the necessity of addressing it promptly. Undoubtedly, the formidable Firkin posed the greatest threat in his current state, being the most perilous adversary of all. Enveloped in madness, his eyes glowed with an ominous redness, occasionally uttering various names before charging forth. Within moments, the dwarf brandished his axe, vowing to vanquish the warrior by any means necessary. However, for the formidable Firkin, it proved to be a trivial challenge, swiftly incapacitating Rick with a powerful blow to the chin. Sent sprawling with great force, the dwarf let out a resounding cry of pain, echoing the intensity of his injury. At that pivotal moment, the mercenary seized the opportunity and dashed toward the warrior with astonishing speed. Hurtling towards his adversary, he collided with the formidable Firkin, who swiftly assumed a defensive posture. Despite being on guard, Firkin could only manage to utter one word per minute, each one laden with gravity. Observing the situation, the mercenary deduced that the warrior had succumbed to madness, suggesting the need for magical intervention to restore his sanity. Watching intently, the dwarf remarked on the old man's surprising resilience, despite his advanced age, still able to throw punches. Furthermore, he noticed the Lord of the Dead reclining nearby on a throne of bones, curiously inactive. Upon inquiry, the Lord confessed his frailty, admitting his inability to withstand blows from his combative companion. Responding wryly, he insinuated that the Phantom King's intentions were far from noble, merely exploiting those he deemed useful. Following a brief pause, the warrior's companion asserted that the present moment represented the last opportunity for the Phantom King to confront Firkin. Reflecting on this, the mercenary acquiesced to the temporary alliance. Infusing his remark with sarcasm, the Lord of the Dead mused on the significance of this moment, where they would unite against the warrior. The Phantom King, possessing formidable magic, began to emanate energy from his hands, independent of the dwarf's assistance. Closing in on his target, he whispered that conventional attacks were futile against such a powerful adversary. He recognized only one method to break the control: to eliminate the caster. Alternatively, there might be another approach. For instance, influencing the target directly, similar to the attempt made by the mercenary before, albeit executed quite poorly, as he faced a formidable obstacle in the form of a strong opponent ready to strike him down. Meanwhile, lost in his reverie, the warrior envisioned the final moments of the two-headed dragon's life unfolding before him. With a swift stroke of his sword, he vanquished the dragon, its body collapsing inert upon the ground. Pondering over which impactful phrase to utter as he lifted his sword, he proclaimed their team's triumphant march into battle, only to be met with silence. Turning to his comrades, he implored them to rally forth, declaring their path to victory. Observing this spectacle, Firkin, today's stalwart, marveled at how feeble he once appeared. He acknowledged the plethora of weaknesses from his past, even the daunting battle against the two-headed dragon. Reflecting on this, the warrior concluded that it must be a dream, sensing a pressing matter awaiting his attention. However, deeming it unimportant due to his forgetfulness, he surrendered to the bliss of slumber. A voice from the past urged him to keep moving forward, reminding him that the enemy had been defeated. In agreement, the warrior acknowledged that these times were not without their charms, finding camaraderie in their shared adventures. Perhaps if not for the war with the demons, he would be among them, laughing and chatting as they once did. Yet, a sudden intruder shattered this illusion, claiming that their reminiscences were mere words lacking substance. There was no tangible confirmation of their past camaraderie. As the warrior turned, he beheld a familiar visage addressing him. He inquired vehemently about the situation, recalling a similarly violent nation from his past. The visage explained it was a work in progress, attributing his solitude to a reason the warrior failed to perceive in others. The warrior demanded immediate silence, doubting the ability of the visage to comprehend true happiness. The visage chuckled, doubting Firkin's strength and standing firmly by his words. Confidently, the visage reminded Firkin of his responsibility in losing the holy sword and the subsequent demise of Bendel. Transforming into a younger version of the warrior, the visage attributed all misfortunes to himself. The present warrior retorted, recalling his less audacious youth, advising the visage to think twice before speaking. Two younger versions of Firkin intervened, claiming Dariel's sacrifice wouldn't have occurred if not for the lost sword. The domino effect was discussed. Had Ariel been present and Bendel survived, the warrior wouldn't have lost his revered sword. Despite the psychological pressure, Firkin remained resolute in his quest to find the sword and reverse time. The youthful visage opposed, branding the endeavor as a shameful pursuit to erase the stigma of a lost sword and seek vengeance on the Demon King. It revealed the true motive behind the warrior's yearning for the holy sword. The warrior's true desire for the holy sword was revealed, to shed the stigma of loss and confront the Demon King. The youthful image of Firkin aged suddenly, his voice growing hoarser. Confirming the previous assertions, the aged image remarked on warrior's self-centered nature, emphasizing the exclusivity of wielding the holy sword. In an instant, all images vanished, replaced by a familiar presence gripping the warrior's shoulder. Turning, he found the Phantom King standing before him, advising swift evasion of an impending strike. A phantom guillotine materialized overhead, poised to descend at any moment. The Lord urged Firkin the Strong to recognize the gravity of the moment, warning of dire consequences should he fail to act. Failure to awaken would result in his demise, leaving no trace of his existence. The spell's energy dispersed, prompting Rarik's warning that even the mighty warrior would succumb to such an attack. Yet, tension mounted as the warrior remained motionless, then released a deep breath. Observing his transformation, the dwarf glimpsed a form unseen for too long. With a swift motion, the warrior's hand pulsed with radiant energy. It seemed celestial forces lent momentum to his fist as it struck the ground with incredible force. The swing, though slow, brimmed with unparalleled effort. Amidst the chaos, a mercenary warned nearby comrades to flee with all haste. Glancing at Rurik, the warrior found him resigned, likening himself to a falling nuclear bomb. The force of the blow was utterly astounding, leaving the warrior's eyes devoid of any gleam. All present assumed defensive stances, anticipating the imminent surge of energy. The luminous intensity ceased its ascent, Yet the unfolding spectacle held a captivating allure as its conclusion drew near. Through parted fingers, the Phantom King observed the unfolding events, keen to witness the epicenter's dynamics. I instinctively shut my eyes, fearing the energy's potential to breach defenses and bring about demise. As the radiance dimmed, he cautiously unveiled his gaze, fixing it squarely ahead. With hands lowered, the Phantom King chuckled, sensing the halfway mark of their mission achieved. Finally, the warrior regained consciousness, emerging from his stupor. A faint wisp of smoke emanated from a minor abrasion on the warrior's right cheek. The mercenary quipped aloud, likening the warrior's awakening to a self-inflicted wake-up call, relieved that consciousness was restored. Adjusting his neck post-blow, the warrior realigned himself from the jolt. His mood soured as the vivid dream lingered in his mind. Meanwhile, Duran's mount let out a resounding cry, ascending higher up the mountain slope. The gap between hooves and ground widened to approximately 20 centimeters, propelling the steed skyward. It became apparent to onlookers that the adversary possessed an apparent ability to soar with remarkable ease. The Phantom King approached the warrior, inquiring if he had indeed awoken following the blow. Confirming the pain, the warrior recounted memories of Doran, whose actions had also soured his spirits. The Phantom King, recalling the warrior's susceptibility to mental assaults, noted Furkan's advice to Rurik on averting hypnosis by simply squinting. Suspended in mid-air, the adversary surveyed his motionless foes, exuding an eerie aura. A chilling sight met their gaze, a spectral horseman astride a headless steed. Suddenly, the disembodied head spoke, lamenting the warrior's absence for decades. Identifying Furkan by his stature, the head inquired about the warrior's reception of its gift, expressing regret for his return to consciousness and the allure of dream-bound existence. The warrior remained silent, his narrowed gaze betraying his disorientation. Furkan redirected his attention to the Phantom King, unable to discern his speech due to his lack of vocal cords, prompting a response acknowledging the limitation. Expressing a longing for another, the enemy referenced the Phantom King's apparent transformation into a compliant warrior. As Doran prepared to interject, a mercenary swiftly intervened, launching a surprise attack from above. Despite Doran's evasion, the ease with which the assailant reached their position left him incredulous. Though the enemy evaded the blows, the audacity of the attack left Doran reeling. Shocked by the intruder's unexpected agility, Doran grappled with the surreal nature of the encounter. Uttering these words, three dwarves descended upon him from above, their spears poised for attack. Despite the increasing onslaught, Doran deftly maneuvered through the air, evading each strike. As the dwarves plummeted post-assault, phantom hands intercepted them, though not without causing some injury. Bewildered by the unexpected aerial assault, Doran sought the source of the attackers. Turning his gaze, he spotted the woodland entity clutching a dwarf spear on the ground. Instructing Yun to brace for an impending dwarf shot, Doran braced for the imminent threat. Realization dawned on Doran. The manipulative creature had orchestrated the assault, liberating the dwarves from mind control. Reacting swiftly, Doran sprang into action, catching observers off guard. In a hushed tone, Doran vowed to vanquish the creature while commanding the entity to ready the next offensive. Furkan marveled at the enemy's agility, barely a blink passing before the foe neared the woodland entity. Yet just as the assailant closed in, Yun's eyes emanated a soft pink glow, inducing an unsettling sensation within Doran's core. In an instant, Doran found himself amidst verdant grass, more vibrant than any he had beheld before. Seizing the opportunity, his mount indulged in the lush pasture, heedless of Doran's commands. Disoriented by the sudden change, the villain struggled to comprehend his surroundings. Despite the chaos, an unexpected serenity enveloped Doran, suggesting the creature harbored a tranquil haven within. The whereabouts of the monstrous entity remained elusive, its presence seemingly intertwined with Doran's very essence. Suddenly, the creature swelled to immense proportions, its colossal arm poised to strike at Doran once more. The horse recoiled in terror as the looming appendage threatened to engulf them both. Doran jolted back to reality with a piercing scream, his senses engulfed in panic. Desperate to assert his identity, he vehemently denied being a mere beetle, his voice echoing with defiance. A warrior, still squinting, approached him, addressing him as the Stag. Urging Doran to expedite matters, the warrior expressed disdain for delays. Doran, bewildered by their group's mysterious intervention, lamented their ineffectiveness against the threat. His frustration mounting, Doran emphasized that strength alone did not determine one's willingness to fight. The dwarves, driven to madness once more, encircled them, their aggression unchecked save for the indifferent Phantom King. Before Doran could voice further protest, the warrior unleashed a luminous fist, cleaving the earth with staggering force. With unwavering resolve, the warrior reiterated his aversion to procrastination as the crack widened ominously. Energy rippled through the ground, fracturing the terrain with alarming speed. Doran's techniques faltered in the face of this overwhelming power, crumbling beneath its relentless onslaught. Standing beside the Phantom King, Doran cautioned him to tread carefully, recognizing the familiar aura of death after enduring 3 such devastating techniques. Initially dismissing the attack, Doran soon felt the impact reverberating through his abdomen. In a surreal twist, the head detached from the hand, veering off in an unpredictable trajectory. Within moments, the head landed at the feet of the patiently waiting Phantom King, seizing the opportune moment. Standing over the fallen artifact, the Phantom King hesitated momentarily, recognizing the unexpected turn of events. As the Lord of the Dead retrieved the artifact, Durant protested vehemently, unaware of the unfolding scheme. A wry smile graced the Phantom King's countenance as he addressed the assembly. The Dark Magician casually remarked on borrowing the head temporarily, downplaying its significance. Meanwhile, the warrior and mercenary subdued the remnants of Doran, his body exhibiting a strange resilience. Despite the onslaught, Doran's body remained upright, enduring the relentless blows. As the warrior continued his assault, the Phantom King ceremoniously adorned Doran's helmet upon his own head. Firkin, astute as ever, swiftly discerned the significance of the exchange, casting a wary glance at his superior. Observing the acquisition of the artifact, Firkin tensed, recognizing its potential to augment the Phantom King's power. Expressing concern over the appropriation of another's property, Firkin urged restraint. Speculation arose among the ranks as to the Phantom King's intentions, hinting at the possibility of rebellion. However, the close confidant reassured them, dismissing the notion of such reckless endeavors. Indeed, the Phantom King had arrived with a specific purpose for the helmet: to delve into the mind of one of their comrades. Seizing the opportunity, he subtly influenced the mercenary's thoughts, directing Turan towards the task at hand, probing Adol's mind. His curiosity piqued by recent revelations, the Phantom King sought confirmation of the mercenary's words. As the energy emanating from the helmet engulfed him, the mercenary's demeanor shifted, his gaze vacant as the probing began. Capitalizing on the moment, the Phantom King initiated his move. Suddenly he found himself in a different dimension, his senses attuned to the solidity beneath his feet. Surveying his surroundings, he found himself within a humble wooden hut, evidently inhabited. Amidst the modest surroundings lay an array of valuable magical tomes, their significance not lost on the observant intruder. Peering through a window, he beheld an ethereal glow, indicative of potent magic at work. Intrigued, he adjusted his helmet, compelled to explore the source of the luminous spectacle. Stepping towards the exit, he pondered the whereabouts of Adil. Abruptly, lightning struck perilously close, signaling an imminent confrontation. A towering spirit materialized, gathering lightning above its imposing form. Unleashing its formidable power, the spirit targeted the diminutive Adil, questioning his resilience against 1,000,000 volts. In response, the boy calmly raised his hand, prompting the spirit to await his reply. With a single gesture, Adil erected a protective barrier, shielding himself from the electrifying onslaught. The spirit, thrown into turmoil, refused to accept the reality unfolding before it. Despite his tender years, the boy exuded confidence, evident in his ability to shield himself with a single incantation. The spirit's inquiry about amperage and 1,000,000 volts puzzled the boy. Expressing ignorance, the spirit launched another assault, prompting the boy to brace for retaliation. Channeling his own energy, the boy prepared to unleash a counteroffensive. Upon impact, the boy recited a formula, revealing the strength of the current coursing through the spirit's form. The spirit's heart succumbed to the overwhelming surge, a testament to the boy's astonishing power. Despite its formidable status as a first-class electric knight, the spirit found itself defeated by a mere schoolboy. The revelation left the Phantom King astounded, unaware of the boy's latent abilities. Even the Lord of the Dead struggled to reconcile the boy's prowess with the inconsistencies of his past. At a mere 10 years old, Adil wielded magical abilities rivaling seasoned sorcerers. Stepping forward, the boy directed his attention to an elderly man seated nearby. Addressing the elderly figure as Master, the boy inquired about his opinion of his skill. It dawned on the Phantom King that the venerable sage, despite his radiant aura, indeed occupied the humble stump, confirming his role as a teacher. The boy proclaimed his superiority to the others, asserting his prowess in mastering the peak of lightning. Continually proving his ability to defend himself, Adil believed he had fulfilled his promise to his grandfather and could depart the forest. However, his grandfather's silence was followed by a declaration of Adil's perceived weakness. Incensed by the rebuke, Adil was cautioned against arrogance by the sage, who emphasized the importance of knowledge and resilience. Resigned to his fate, Adil begrudgingly accepted his grandfather's directive to remain and further hone his skills. Despite his frustration, Adil complied, knowing he had no choice but to obey his grandfather's command. Storming away in indignation, Adil repeatedly asserted his mastery over lightning as he departed. The Phantom King observed with amusement. Despite Adil's initial display of strength, his subsequent behavior puzzled the onlookers. The incongruity of Adil's strength and his grandfather's assessment perplexed the Phantom King. The mystery deepened as the Lord of the Dead approached a mysterious gate within the forest, contemplating the secrets it held. The discrepancy in Adil's perceived strength only heightened suspicions regarding the forest's enigmatic nature. Intent on unraveling the mysteries within, the Phantom King prepared to venture beyond the gate. Upon opening the gate, he was met with a blinding light, intensifying his curiosity. Determined to uncover Adil's secrets, the Phantom King braced himself for what lay beyond. However, just as he was about to proceed, a voice called out his name, halting his advance. Turning, he recognized Adil's teacher, who seemed to have something important to convey. A strange sensation gripped the Phantom King as it seemed Adil wielded control over his consciousness, barring his passage. Half-Hour approached the gate, proclaiming it unfit for the Phantom King's presence. Unease settled over the Lord of the Dead, fueling his curiosity about the gate's mysteries. His vision clouded with green emptiness. The gatekeeper declared the Phantom King's entry forbidden, identifying himself as the 13th Lich. Despite the expulsion, the gatekeeper warned that Britain would monitor the Phantom King closely. Cast out from the realm, the Phantom King discarded the helmet, lying on the ground with a contented smile, contemplating his discoveries. Content to lie still and process his thoughts, the Phantom King found solace in the momentary reprieve. Approaching him, the warrior inquired about his state. The Lord of the Dead cryptically acknowledged Firkin's insight. Pressed for clarification, the Phantom King revealed the existence of a powerful sage residing within Adil. The warrior, unsettled by this revelation, urged the Phantom King to articulate his thoughts clearly. Emphasizing Adil's remarkable prowess at a young age, the Phantom King's words resonated with discomforting implications. The mercenary bristled at the implications, particularly given their recent intrusion into Adil's mind. Turning towards the mercenary, the Phantom King pointed out that all they sought lay within Adil's mind. Asserting that Adil's mind held all the answers a warrior needed, the Phantom King left the mercenary to ponder the implications. Meanwhile, events unfolded in the capital of the Iron Empire, known colloquially as either Here stood an imposing fortress, its sheer size and intricate architecture leaving all visitors in awe. Within its walls, two warriors engaged in training, their skills so evenly matched that the victor remained uncertain. It appeared that Sargon was the one sparring with his subordinates. His opponent moved with remarkable speed, making it immensely challenging for him to deflect the incoming strikes. Yet, in a swift motion, his blade came dangerously close to the neck of a young woman among his squad. Despite the tension, he chuckled, admitting uncertainty about the outcome of their bout. Conceding defeat, he acknowledged his inability to best the skilled young woman. Meanwhile, in another corner of the room, applause erupted as spectators praised the impressive spectacle. Among them was Duncan, the vice captain of the esteemed Order of Knighthood, who observed keenly. Noticing a telltale tension in the warrior's shoulders, Duncan made a mental note. Without formalities, he approached the uninvited guest, inquiring about his purpose with directness. Drawing nearer, Duncan remarked on the rumors circulating about Owen's failed mission. With a hint of amusement, he found the situation rather entertaining, a rarity in his experience. Duncan frowned at the pretense of indifference, noting Owen's failure and loss of his secondary sword. He questioned why Owen persisted in tarnishing the honor of their esteemed order rather than facing his shortcomings. It seemed Owen had encountered similar setbacks in the past, a fact not lost on those familiar with his history. Owen bristled inwardly at Duncan's words, though his upbringing taught him to maintain composure in the face of insult. Suddenly, the girl removed her helmet, interjecting to halt the escalating argument between the men. Her presence, striking and captivating, had a calming effect on Duncan, her beauty alone sufficing to ease his agitation. Sheathed his sword promptly, Duncan acquiesced, conceding to the girl's intervention. "Very well," he said. "This time, Kel shall have her say." Extending an invitation, Duncan urged the girl to join his faction, deeming it a waste for someone of her caliber to remain within her current unit. Without hesitation, the girl declined the offer, prompting Duncan to acknowledge her affinity for the battlefield. Despite Duncan's persistence, the girl reiterated her commitment to her current duties, citing a 4-day assignment that precluded any team changes. With a facade of confidence, Duncan conceded defeat and began to depart the training area. An onlooker lamented that the unwelcome guest had disrupted their enjoyment with his presence. Just before exiting, the vice captain of the Order of Knighthood remembered the purpose of his visit. He sought information on the whereabouts of Firkin Strong, explaining that imperial decree had transferred the warrior's mission to him, indicating a consolidation of authority over their errors. The revelation incited anger, evident even to observers, as Duncan's emotions boiled to the surface. After a moment, laughter erupted from the vice captain, causing Duncan to question his sanity momentarily. Once his amusement subsided, the deputy commander assured them that Firkin Strong would soon meet the one who sought him. With that, the stage was set for the encounter between the Lord of Light and the eager seeker. As events unfolded, the Phantom King gestured towards the mercenary, suggesting that he held the key to all their troubles. Initially perplexed, the mercenary questioned whether the solution lay within his own body. Casting a glance towards Adil, he pondered the significance of the words, spoken so cryptically by the Lord of the Dead. Eyeing the mercenary thoughtfully, the Phantom King inquired whether Adil was, in fact, a sacred blade. The mercenary, gripped by fear at the implication, struggled to comprehend the enigmatic revelation. Clarifying his statement, the Lord of the Dead explained that Adil harbored a vast reservoir of magical energy within, akin to the Earth's beating heart. This immense power, he lamented, remained inaccessible due to the sage's intervention, likening Adil to a dormant vessel of elemental might. Thus, the Phantom King suggested that the mercenary himself was the vessel, the living embodiment of the Earth's essence. Acknowledging the explanation, the mercenary expressed his frustration with the convoluted discourse, delivering a series of feeble blows to the Ghost King. Contemplating the situation, the warrior concluded that a sacrifice was necessary to unlock the dormant power within. Thus, they proposed employing mercenaries as sacrificial conduits, sparing the Earth's heart from harm. Though the Phantom King saw no issue with this plan, the warrior recognized the inherent complications. The crux lay in obtaining a divine essence, requiring the extraction of a deity's soul without detection. However, their target was a skilled magician, complicating matters. The mercenary emphasized the impossibility of breaking the seal within him without resorting to magic. Consequently, he sought a mentor capable of unsealing his latent magical abilities, recognizing himself as the sole key to unlocking a deal's true potential. The current predicament was far from ideal, requiring the completion of several additional tasks to reach their ultimate goal. Meanwhile, Varric retrieved the fallen helmet, questioning the warrior about their next course of action regarding it. Firkin surveyed the motionless form of their adversary and speculated that he might have perished. However, the Phantom King disagreed, suggesting that the foe was merely unconscious. Duran, he explained, was a golem, one of the living armors crafted by the ancient Great Master Armor. Centuries after the armor's demise, the Demon King stumbled upon Duran in his temple, where the living armor guarded the legacy. The Demon King revived Duran and appointed him as the Supreme Commander, a position he currently held. Furthermore, the Phantom King revealed a small switch within the helmet. Activating it would prompt Duran to proclaim his imminent display of power. Firkin Strong wondered if there was a remote control to facilitate Duran's management. The Lord of the Dead proposed seizing the opportunity to capture Duran and claim the Earth's heart for themselves. However, the dwarf interjected, noting the necessity of gaining entry to the castle. The warrior suggested a direct approach on foot, but Raric raised concerns about their people. Their next objective was to uncover any spare or secret passages leading to their destination. While there were potential routes, the absence of the rider's warhorse implied heightened security measures by the castle's master upon its return riderless. The warrior emphasized the need to reconsider their approach, particularly with an enemy general in their midst, before deciding to brave the main entrance. Varric proposed diplomacy, citing its historical success in similar missions. As they deliberated, Firkin's gaze fixated on the Phantom King, hinting at a revelation. Holding the helmet, the Phantom King's contemplation sparked a realization of a better strategy. Some unspoken understanding seemed to pass between their minds, guiding the Lord of the Dead towards a novel approach. Transitioning to the main castle, several vigilant vampires guarded the entrance, scrutinizing approaching figures. A familiar individual approached, prompting two guards to mistake him for Sir Doran. Confirming his identity as Margulies Doran, the character made his presence known. Meanwhile, in the nearby forge, a significant event unfolded, capturing everyone's attention. Dwarves toiled tirelessly, working with a precious stone obtained through great effort. The girl oversaw the process meticulously, ensuring perfection and preventing errors. As she delivered the final strike, an inexplicable phenomenon began to unfold. Her assistant observed the unstable state of the Earth's heart, signaling a momentous transformation. The small fragment of the Earth's heart levitated, absorbing energy and attracting surrounding objects. With joyous proclamation, the dwarf declared the birth of the purified Earth's heart, marking a monumental achievement for all. Despite the jubilation surrounding the successful cleansing, the girl remained focused on the stone's condition, indifferent to the celebration. Her unwavering scrutiny revealed the stone's newfound instability. Upon closer inspection, its precarious state became evident. Spotting a small crack, she shattered it with her hammer, voicing her concern over the unforeseen development. The dwarves, realizing the implications, braced themselves for another arduous day of work. The girl explained that regardless of the thorough cleaning, the stone's durability remained compromised by its slow formation. To rectify this, they needed to restart the melting furnace and accelerate the process. Concerned about the potential explosion of magical energy, the dwarf cautioned against such risks, prompting the girl to inquire about the remaining masons. Realizing the gravity of the situation, she reminded them that they too must contribute, even at the risk of their lives. The dwarves, confronted with the reality of the situation, resigned themselves to the extensive work ahead, realizing their return home would be delayed. Meanwhile, the girl examined a small fragment of the stone in her hands, contemplating its significance. Unbeknownst to her, the vampire lord stood silently behind her all along. Turning to him, she queried his arrival and how long he had observed the proceedings. In response, he confessed to monitoring the girl due to the massive surge of magical energy emanating from the site. Taking a small fragment, he marveled at its ability to yield such potent power despite its diminutive size. Initiating her task, the girl updated the master on their progress, emphasizing the importance of honoring his commitment. Completing the endeavor rested heavily on the shoulders of the diminutive girl, considering the safety of the dwarves. While urging her to expedite matters, the master cautioned that his patience had its limits. Drawing closer, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, preparing to deliver his next directive. He conveyed that, given the circumstances, the dwarves would need to forego their customary 4-day work week. Though outsiders typically couldn't access labor insurance, the girl considered the master an exception in this instance. As the master prepared to depart the forge, his ward approached with urgent news, prompting direct intervention. The importance of the message compelled the subordinates to insist on the master's personal attention. Navigating through several chambers, they encountered Duran's familiar steed, prompting concern. Recognizing the horse as Duran's own, the master's certainty heightened, despite its unexpected presence. The appearance of Duran's horse hinted at potential trouble, possibly orchestrated by the Order's punishers. Uncertain of their adversaries' capabilities, the master ordered heightened security measures from the castle gates to the secret passage. With the Demon King's resurrection imminent, any interference with their plans was unacceptable. Meanwhile, a small group maneuvered through the dimly lit basement under the guidance of several vampires. The group's arrival drew a sharp reaction from the vampires present, who were on edge due to their numbers. Initially inclined to attack, the vampires restrained themselves upon realizing that Duran guided them, deferring to the master for judgment. Duran's leadership ensured their safe passage to the master, where their fate would be determined. Alongside the warrior's entourage, Firkin Strong himself was present, reinforcing their collective. A vampire expressed astonishment at Duran's ability to capture the knights, considering their prowess in battle. Puzzled by Duran's apparent magical prowess, the vampire struggled to comprehend his ability to overcome formidable opponents. Sometime earlier, the warrior had pledged to restore the Ghost King's title in exchange for his compliance. Despite potential promotion to Phantom Emperor, the Lord of the Dead seemed unimpressed. The warrior remarked jovially that only he could emulate Doran's unique ability, suggesting its practicality in their current situation. The Ghost King entertained the idea of launching an immediate attack upon their arrival. However, an intervening voice emphasized the necessity of cleansing the stone's magical energy beforehand. It was noted that only gnomes possessed the expertise required for this task. Recognizing the importance of assisting the dwarves in achieving their goal, the warriors' commitment to obtaining the Heart of the Earth was reinforced. Firkin embraced the Phantom King, highlighting their ability to achieve multiple objectives simultaneously. Suddenly, the Lord of the Dead vanished, reappearing directly behind the warrior. Following this, she remarked that his ultimate goal was to eventually claim the soul of Firkin Strong. The hero retorted that such ambitions were merely grandiose fantasies, unlike the Lord of the Dead's mockery of Duran, which he found distasteful. Despite his reservations, he acknowledged that disguising himself and infiltrating the castle was the only viable course of action. When asked about the next steps, the hero assured that he had a clear plan in mind. The Phantom King would feign capturing the entire group, binding them and gaining entry to the castle. Upon reaching the prison, they would liberate the captive dwarves while he detained the master to prevent his escape. As they proceeded, Doran inquired about the master's current whereabouts from one of the vampires. However, the vampires suddenly halted, casting suspicious glances at the people they were escorting. Abruptly, they shrieked, declaring that the master had ordered their immediate demise on the spot. One of them lunged at the hero, striking him directly on the head, causing excruciating pain. Grappling with agony, he inspected his hand, realizing all his fingers were broken. Cursing, he demanded to know why the vampire screamed in pain. Reacting swiftly, he retaliated by striking the vampire's body, propelling him into Doran, who stood nearby. The impact dislodged the helmet from Doran's grasp, sending it plummeting to the ground. The vampires diverted their attention from their adversaries, fixating on the helmet slowly rolling along the ground. Unbeknownst to them, the helmet housed the head of the Phantom King, who lamented his apparent demotion yet again. By then, Firkin Strong had freed himself from his bonds, remarking that things had unfolded predictably. As others followed suit in breaking their shackles, their commander asserted the need to adapt to the unfolding situation. A vampire couple stood guard at the entrance to a chamber, alerting to an approaching figure. They demanded the stranger halt and identify themselves. Undeterred by their threats, Firkin Strong continued advancing toward them. Upon reaching them, he boldly claimed to be their nemesis. Unconvinced, the vampires challenged his assertion, prompting him to reiterate his identity. Before he could elaborate further, he swiftly incapacitated one vampire and struck down another with incredible speed. With the path clear, they could proceed into the room unhindered. Firkin Strong forcefully kicked open the door, granting access. With a resounding impact, the door swung open. The warrior's voice resonated loudly as he assured the dwarves inside of his intent to rescue them. To understand the events that followed, we must rewind 30 minutes into the past. Utilizing Doran's helmet, the Lord of the Dead coerced information from a vampire about the whereabouts of the gnomes. Upon receiving the precise locations from the vampire, the warrior realized that these were the exact places they needed to investigate. Confirming the information, the Lord of the Dead inquired of Firkin Strong whether the other team members had completed their tasks. Firkin Strong affirmed their competence, stating that they had successfully dealt with all the vampires. In the meantime, the warrior remarked on the Phantom King's remarkable ability to reattach his head. He further mentioned an annual surge of potent mind-controlling force possessed by the Phantom King, questioning why it wasn't utilized for covert infiltration. The Phantom King clarified that he had merely borrowed the strength of another through Doran's helmet and wasn't yet targeting larger structures. Doran was equipped with a body capable of commanding a living armor army and specialized in reviving and controlling the undead through spells. Ignoring these details, Firkin Strong proposed splitting up to cover all the mentioned locations. He inquired if the Phantom King could employ a spell for navigation. After a while, the warrior entered a room and found it devoid of life except for old furniture. Surveying the area, he confirmed the absence of any living beings. Behind him stood a deceased vampire who possessed knowledge of the dwarves' whereabouts, prompting Firkins to inquire if the dwarves had been found. Addressing the ghostly king, the warrior sought reassurance about their chosen path. The king responded in the negative, indicating that the other locations explored by their comrades were similarly vacant. The possibility of the deceased providing false information was dismissed, as the spell's influence precluded lying. It was more plausible to consider that the dwarves had been relocated elsewhere. Determining where and why presented a more challenging task. The Ghost King suggested scenarios such as a vampire buffet or the dwarves being moved preemptively due to an anticipation of their arrival. The warrior contemplated their next steps, but the Lord of the Dead interrupted, claiming to have seen something outside. He appeared intrigued, suggesting he had halted because of something that piqued his interest. Adil, upon inspection, discovered the bloody corpse of a dwarf, suggesting a gruesome demise. Upon receiving this information from the Phantom King, the warrior's expression darkened further. Adil approached the dwarf's body, respectfully covering it with a small sheet and bidding him farewell for the afterlife. The mercenaries grimly speculated that they might have arrived too late. Suddenly, they noticed and heard movement from a cage in the room's corner. Upon closer examination, they discovered an ailing gnome pleading for release with his last ounce of strength. Adil assured the gnome of his well-being and promised immediate liberation. However, upon witnessing the dwarf's condition, Adil was momentarily stunned, unable to react. The gnome's entire body emitted a bright blue glow indicating a magical affliction. Recognizing the severity of the situation, Adil realized the gnome was suffering from magical addiction. With each passing moment, the gnome's glow intensified, accompanied by cries of distress directed at Adil. The prisoner appeared to be losing control, with mana seeping from his body, indicating an imminent explosion. The warrior pondered his next move until an explosion rang out, causing stones to cascade from the ceiling. The king warned of a genuine trap, confirming their unfortunate entrapment. Despite the significant explosion, Adil miraculously survived. However, his survival seemed uncertain, facing several vampires poised to rend his flesh. Furkan the Strong received word from the Lord of the Dead of Adil's ambush, signaling challenging times ahead. The vampires cunningly baited Adil with gnomes and scattered them beforehand. An immediate vampire assault ensued, but Adil stood ready to retaliate. Adil swiftly turned his head, realizing a vampire approached from his blind spot. With precision, he struck the vampire's forehead, sending them crashing to the ground. The Phantom King continued narrating the unfolding events in Adil's chamber and the ensuing battle. The mercenary excelled, pummeling the vampires to death with his bare hands. This continued until someone grabbed his fist. Adil glanced back to find a higher-ranking vampire behind him, but fear did not grip him. With steely resolve, he commanded the vampire to release his grip. This adversary seemed reticent, offering no response to Adil's words. The Lord of the Dead alerted the warrior to escalating tensions, with another entity entering the essence of the forest. Several vampires emerged, making their presence known as they approached Furkan. It appeared the master had summoned vampires of higher rank than encountered previously. Furkan, sensing the urgency, interrogated one of the undead, pledging to vanquish them all. As he shook the vampire, its neck ridge suddenly snapped, leading to its demise and severing their connection. With the vampire's death, their link was severed. The Phantom King, present in the room, realized he could no longer maintain contact with that vampire. Amidst the commotion, he heard a noise behind him and turned to investigate. Before him stood the most formidable vampire the Lord of the Dead had ever witnessed, prompting a moment of contemplation. Meanwhile, the dwarves remained stationed near the exit of their base, vigilant over the gate. The unit commander meticulously observed all observable changes. An advisor approached, noting the absence of a given signal. The commander acknowledged the need for continued vigilance, finding it peculiar that the mission lingered despite the presence of a warrior. The advisor concurred, acknowledging the unmatched prowess of the warrior tasked with resolving the situation. They remained on alert, ensuring the safe return of their comrades and the successful completion of the mission. Soon, they noticed suspicious movements behind them and swiftly turned to investigate. There stood a stranger clad in tidy attire and armor, unmoving. Eventually, the stranger requested they lower their spears and listen. Assuring them of his innocence, he claimed to only seek explanation. One dwarf voiced suspicion regarding the stranger's mask, prompting a request for its removal. In response, the stranger proposed a peaceful conversation, urging them to disarm. In an instant, the stranger unleashed a gravity manipulation technique, immobilizing all the dwarves. Bewildered, the dwarves found themselves levitating, unable to comprehend the mystifying technique. Upon landing, one dwarf admitted ignorance regarding gravity, citing its absence in medieval knowledge. The stranger remarked on the gnomes' remarkable magical resistance or questioned their intellect. A giant icon materialized behind the stranger, explaining his use of the technique to greet the gnomes at a grand scale. He reassured them of their innocence, urging the dwarves to ease their caution. Varric pointed out their non-adventurous appearance and cautioned against entry into the fortress. The vice-captain of the First Order of Knighthood clarified his quest for a friend, expressing disinterest in their abode. Named Furkan Strong, the warrior followed his own path as Duke had informed the stranger. Grateful for any information, the stranger implored the dwarf to disclose Furkan Strong's whereabouts. Meanwhile, the entire castle trembled as an intense battle raged on every floor. Vlad approached the spectral king, appearing poised for conversation. The long-awaited meeting left the Lord of the Dead feeling uneasy. The vampire master reflected on the passage of 30 years, remarking on their prolonged separation. Their reunion in the castle coincided with the presence of the first lich, known as the Phantom King. However, their conversation was abruptly halted by the deafening noise of battle from the floor above. The combatants, fighting fervently in Latrell's name, echoed through the castle halls. Among them, an ordinary mercenary valiantly defended the fortress. Another combatant, a formidable monster, wielded unmatched strength against any foe. An elderly warrior tirelessly hammered at a stone wall, his goal obscure. Puzzled by the Phantom King's association with such disparate characters, the stranger questioned their connection. The Phantom King admitted to once sharing Vlad Real's skepticism. However, everything changed with the arrival of a singular individual who defeated him. The vampire master remarked to the old warrior that it appeared he was unaware of his own past feats, where he had torn spirits apart with his bare hands during their prolonged separation. Despite being separated for 30 years, this warrior's existence oscillated between life and death, exerting influence over the continent's formidable forces. What made him truly terrifying was the fact that his power was not derived from any magical source. The vampire master speculated that the Phantom King had weakened, prompting him to acknowledge the warrior's strength and betray the Demon King. Turning to his old friend, the Lord of the Dead inquired about his muttered words. The warrior claimed to be a loyal member of the Demon King's army, capable of betraying anyone associated with it. While betrayal seemed commonplace for the warrior, Vlad's honor and loyalty suggested he may not always align with righteousness. The vampire master chuckled, noting that the Phantom King hadn't lost his sense of amusement over the years. He revisited the topic of betrayal, suggesting it would be advantageous to betray the warrior and join the Demon King's army. The warrior countered, stating that betrayal should yield benefits, and he saw no reason to do so when his priority was stopping the enraged warrior. Vlad asserted that as a soldier of the Demon King, he should be trusted, especially with the Demon King's imminent resurrection. He hinted at obtaining the heart of the earth, abundant with souls for the resurrection ritual, wherein the Demon King would be reborn as a lich through the sacrifice of the dwarves. The Ghost King questioned whether the Demon King had truly died. This statement puzzled the vampire master, especially when the Lord of the Dead asked if he had seen the Demon King's corpse. Furthermore, it piqued curiosity whether he had encountered the Demon King's soul or heard any reports of his demise. Vlad, incredulous, ordered him to cease speaking, unable to entertain the notion of the Demon King's survival. The Phantom King conceded uncertainty regarding the Demon King's fate, likening him to a Schrödinger's Demon King. Unsettled by his opponent's attempt to sow doubt, the vampire master declared an end to the dialogue. Summoning the Blood Phantom sword, he commanded it to terminate the tedious conversation. A ghostly figure materialized behind the Lord of the Dead with a sigh, expressing curiosity about the strength of the four commanders. The present moment offered an opportune time to settle this inquiry. Meanwhile, combat ensued in each room the group entered. Adil faced the greatest challenge, contending with a multitude of adversaries in his chamber. Despite their constant assaults, Adil effectively countered and dodged their attacks. The most formidable vampire seized a strategic position, announcing their intent to escalate the game. Unleashing a torrent of flames, he targeted Adil, who braced himself with a defensive stance. Observing from the sidelines, the vampires marveled at the unprecedented display of firepower. Assessing his opponent, the mercenary recognized the skill disparity, positioning himself advantageously. Retrieving a vial of unknown liquid from his pocket, he prepared to deploy it. Meanwhile, the vampire, spewing flames from his mouth, taunted the mercenary, questioning if that was truly his full capability. In response, the mercenary retorted, suggesting the vampire could use some gasoline to enhance the flames. Suddenly, a protective shield enveloped the mercenary, halting the fire's advance. Confounded, the vampire found himself at a loss for action. Seizing the opportunity, the mercenary approached, advising the vampire to start feeling fear. Unbeknownst to those in the room, the mercenary had not practiced the next technique in a long while, risking potential overexertion. No one could anticipate the true extent of Adal's power, raising questions about the world's readiness for it. Well, friends, I don't know about you, but I like this manhwa. The plot itself is quite interesting and intriguing. So if you liked the video, then subscribe to the channel and write a comment about what you liked. If new chapters of this title are released, I will definitely make a continuation. All the best. See you soon.